Yo, what's up, everyone? It's Goofy Harry, and today we're checking out if John Wick found Harry in a dumpster and raised the most dangerous wizard assassin the world has ever seen. Drop a like if you're hyped. Subscribe for daily content. Let's get this story started. Chapter 1: The dumpster behind the Continental. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. New York wore it like a funeral shroud, gray and relentless, turning the streets into black mirrors that reflected nothing worth seeing. November had come and mean that year, the kind of cold that crawled under your collar and set up camp in your bones. The city didn't care. It never did. Cabs still honked. People still walked too fast with their heads down, and in the alleys behind the nice buildings, the rats still owned the night. John Wick came through the service entrance of the Continental Hotel at 14 minutes past 2 in the morning. His suit was dark charcoal, 3-button, tailored in Milan. There was blood on the left cuff, not his. He carried a black duffel in his right hand, and his gait was the particular kind of steady that belonged to a man who had done hard work and was ready for a drink in silence in that order. The service corridor was narrow, lit by buzzing fluorescents that gave everything a yellowish pallor. John knew this hallway. He'd used it 100 times. It ran from the alley entrance through the back of the kitchen and up to the private elevator that would take him to the 7th floor. No lobby, no small talk, no one looking at the blood on his cuff. He was 6 steps from the kitchen door when he stopped, not because of a sound exactly, or not just a sound. It was something beneath the sound, a frequency that bypassed the thinking part of his brain and hit the part that had kept him alive through Minsk and Tangier and that basement in Sao Paulo, the part that noticed things. He stood still, listened, rain on metal, the hum of an exhaust fan, a dripping pipe somewhere overhead. And underneath all of it, so faint it was almost not there, a thin, ragged, hiccuping sound, crying, not an adult, not a cat. John had heard enough of both to know the difference instantly. He set the duffel down against the wall and drew the heckler and cock from his shoulder holster in a motion so practiced it was like breathing. Then he moved back toward the alley door, pushed it open with his left hand, and stepped out into the rain. The alley was narrow and ugly, pinched between the Continental's west wall and the back of a restaurant supply warehouse. 2 dumpsters sat against the hotel wall, industrial green, overflowing because pickup wasn't until Thursday. The rain hammered on their lids like tin drums. A fire escape zigzagged up the warehouse wall, and a single caged light above the Continental's door threw a circle of dirty yellow onto the wet concrete. John swept the alley with his eyes first, then the roofline, then the shadows between the dumpsters. Nothing moved except the rain. He lowered the weapon slightly, not all the way, never all the way, and followed the sound. It was coming from the second dumpster. The lid was cracked open about 8 inches, propped up by a garbage bag that had been wedged at an angle. The sound came from inside, that thin, exhausted crying, the kind that had been going on for a long time. The kind that had mostly given up but hadn't quite managed to stop. John holstered the weapon. He gripped the lid with both hands and lifted it open. The smell hit him first, wet cardboard, rotting food, the sweet-sick funk of restaurant waste. He ignored it the way he ignored most unpleasant things, which was completely, and looked. There was a baby in the dumpster. It was wedged between a collapsed box and a black garbage bag, lying in a kind of nest that might have been arranged, or might have just been an accident of how the trash had settled. A blanket was wrapped around it, not a garbage blanket, but something deliberate, woven, patterned with something he couldn't make out in the bad light. The baby was small, very small. Its face was scrunched and red and slick with rain, and its mouth was open in that shape that babies make when they've been crying so long their voice has worn down to almost nothing. John stood in the rain with the dumpster lid open and looked at the baby for 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, a series of calculations ran through his mind, the kind he didn't have to think about consciously because they were as embedded in him as his heartbeat. Threat assessment, none. The baby was alone. Origin, unknown. Someone had placed it here or thrown it here. The blanket suggested placed. The dumpster suggested they didn't want it found by the right people. Duration of exposure, hard to say, but the baby's cry was weak, which meant hours, and the rain was cold, which meant the window was closing. He reached in and picked it up. The baby weighed almost nothing, less than his pistol with a full magazine. He held it the way he'd seen it done, one hand under the back, one supporting the head, and he was surprised to find that the motion felt more natural than he expected. The blanket was soaked through, and the baby's skin, where he could see it, was pale with a bluish tint that he didn't like. But it was breathing. Its chest rose and fell in tiny, rapid hitches, and when his hand pressed against its back, he could feel its heart going fast and light like a bird's. It stopped crying. Not gradually all at once like a switch had been flipped. Its eyes opened and looked up at him. dark eyes not quite focused but aimed in his direction with an intensity that seemed wrong for something this small. There was a cut on its forehead, not a random gash, it was shaped. A thin, precise line of red in the rough form of a lightning bolt, the skin around it raised and raw-looking. It wasn't bleeding anymore, but it was fresh. A day old, maybe two. John said. He looked at the blanket. Along one edge, stitched in thread that might have been gold before the rain got to it, was a name. Harry. John looked at the name. He looked at the baby. The baby looked at him with those dark, too-focused eyes, and one of its hands had found the lapel of his suit jacket and was gripping it with a strength that seemed disproportionate. Its fingers were the size of peanuts, and they were white-knuckled. John stood in the alley behind the Continental Hotel in the rain at 2 in the morning with a baby in his arms and blood on his cuff, and he made a decision. It wasn't a dramatic decision. He didn't weigh pros and cons. He didn't think about what it meant or what it would cost. He just made it the way he made all his decisions, quickly, completely, and without looking back. He carried the baby inside. The Continental Hotel existed in a space that was technically part of New York City but practically part of nowhere. It operated under rules that no government had written and no court could enforce, and it served a clientele that didn't appear in any census. It was neutral ground, the one place in the world where the business of death took a pause, where killers could drink good whiskey and sleep in clean sheets without watching the door. The rules were simple. No business on Continental ground. You could have a drink with the man you'd been paid to kill, and he could have one with you, and you'd both walk out alive. What happened after that was your affair. The building itself was old money made stone, 12 stories of pre-war elegance that looked from the outside like a private club for people with inherited wealth and no imagination. Inside, it was something else. Dark wood and warm light, and the kind of silence that came from very good soundproofing, and a staff that had been trained never to react to anything. The Continental's employees had seen men walk through the lobby trailing blood. They'd seen women in evening gowns with garrots coiled in their clutch purses. They'd served room service breakfast to people who were, at that very moment, on the front page of 6 different countries' most wanted lists. None of them had seen John Wick walk in carrying a baby. Karen was behind the front desk, because Karen was always behind the front desk. It was a matter of some speculation among the Continental's residents whether the man actually had a home somewhere else or whether he simply folded himself into a drawer behind the counter when the lobby was empty and re-emerged when someone approached. He was tall and composed, with dark skin and the kind of face that could deliver terrible news without changing expression, which was, in his line of work, a daily requirement. He watched John come through the kitchen corridor and into the lobby. He watched him cross the marble floor, leaving wet footprints. He looked at the bundle in John's arms. He looked at John's face. "Mr. Wick," he said. His tone was precisely calibrated, welcoming, professional, and not even slightly curious, which meant he was extremely curious. "Welcome back. I trust your business concluded satisfactorily." "I need towels," John said, "warm ones," and he paused. He looked down at the baby, which had fallen asleep against his chest with its fist still locked on his lapel. "Milk, do we have milk?" Something shifted in Karen's expression. It was microscopic, a fraction of a degree in the angle of his eyebrows, but on Karen that was the equivalent of another man falling out of his chair. "We have milk, sir. Yes, may I ask?" "Found him out back, in the dumpster." Karen's gaze moved to the baby, then back to John. "I see. Shall I contact the authorities?" "Number the hospital, then." "Number." A beat of silence. Karen processed this. "Warm towels and milk," he repeated. "I'll have them sent to your room immediately." "Will you require anything else?" "A doctor, someone in-house." "Dr. Rosenfeld is currently a guest on the 4th floor. I believe he's still awake. He requested a bottle of Macallan 18 at midnight. I'll see if he's available." "Thank you, Karen." John turned toward the elevator. He made it 3 steps before Karen's voice followed him, quiet and precise. "Mr. Wick, the child, does it have a name?" John looked down at the sleeping face. "Harry," he said. The elevator doors closed. Dr. Rosenfeld was a short, round man who had spent 30 years as a field medic for organizations that didn't exist on paper. He'd sewn up gunshot wounds in hotel bathrooms, set bones in the backs of moving vehicles, and once performed an emergency appendectomy in a shipping container off the coast of Marseille. He was unflappable. It was a prerequisite for his clientele. He was, however, mildly flapped by being summoned to John Wick's room at 2:30 in the morning to examine a baby. "He's dehydrated," the doctor said, holding a small penlight and checking the baby's eyes, his mouth, pressing gently on the fontanelle. "Cold, mildly hypothermic, but he's coming back now that he's warm. No broken bones that I can feel. Healthy weight for his age. I'd put him at 15, 16 months. He paused, looking at the scar on the forehead. He touched it gently with a gloved finger. This is unusual. How? John said. He was standing by the window, arms crossed, watching the doctor work on the bed where he'd laid the baby on a nest of warm towels. The scarring pattern, it's not consistent with any kind of accidental laceration or surgical incision I've seen. The tissue is, well, it's healed, essentially. Fully healed. But the scar tissue itself is unusual, almost like a burn, but not quite. He straightened up and pulled off his gloves. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was ritualistic. But that's not my area. Will he be all right? With proper care, he should be fine. He's a tough little thing. Most babies left out in that kind of cold for any length of time wouldn't be this responsive. He's got some fight in him. The doctor paused. He looked at John with the careful expression of a man who wanted to ask a question but knew that asking questions of John Wick was a hobby with a limited future. Mr. Wick, you understand that I'm not a pediatrician. You're what I have. I can recommend number. Dr. Rosenfeld nodded. He'd been in this world long enough to know when a door was closed. Feed him warm milk, small amounts frequently. Keep him warm. He needs fluids. I'll check on him in the morning. Thank you, doctor. Rosenfeld packed his bag and paused at the door. John, are you sure about this? It was an unusual question because Rosenfeld almost never called him John and because the answer was obviously yes. John didn't do things he wasn't sure about. The doctor knew this. He asked anyway because even people who lived in the world of the Continental sometimes needed to hear the words. Yes, John said. The doctor left. John pulled a chair next to the bed. He poured warm milk into a glass and realized he didn't have a bottle. So he dipped a clean napkin in the milk and held it to the baby's mouth the way he'd once seen a veterinarian feed an orphan puppy. Harry latched onto it and sucked, eyes closed, both hands gripping John's wrist. John sat in the chair and fed the baby and listened to the rain against the window and didn't think about anything at all for a long time. Winston came in the morning. The manager of the Continental was a man who wore authority the way other men wore cologne. It preceded him into a room and lingered after he left. He was silver-haired and sharp-eyed and dressed in a three-piece suit that cost more than most people's cars. He carried himself with the relaxed confidence of a man who controlled a kingdom, which, in the ways that mattered, he did. He found John on the floor of his room, cross-legged, with the baby sitting in his lap chewing on a bread roll that room service had sent up. The room smelled like milk and baby and the faintest trace of gun oil, because John had cleaned his weapons while Harry slept, and old habits didn't die at all. Winston stood in the doorway and took in the scene with an expression that managed to be simultaneously amused, impressed, and mildly horrified. Jonathan, he said, what have you done? Morning, Winston. Karen tells me you found a child in the garbage. Behind the hotel, yes. Winston walked in and lowered himself into the armchair across from John. He looked at the baby, who looked back at him with those dark, unsettlingly focused eyes, bread roll forgot. Winston and the baby regarded each other for a moment with mutual suspicion. The Continental is not a nursery, Winston said. I know what it is. Do you? Because I'm looking at a man who kills people for a living sitting on the floor with a baby in his lap, and I'm struggling with the visual. I'm between jobs. That's not what concerns me. Winston leaned forward, elbows on his knees. John, listen to me. I say this as someone who has a measure of respect for you that borders on the irrational. You cannot keep a baby. Why? The question seemed to genuinely throw Winston. He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. Because you are John Wick. You are the single most lethal human being I have ever personally met, and I have met a great many lethal human beings. Your apartment, your real apartment, the one downtown, has more weapons than furniture. Your life expectancy, actuarially speaking, is catastrophic. You have enemies on 4 continents. Last Tuesday, you killed 3 men in a restaurant in Queens. It was self-defense. It was Tuesday. My point, Jonathan, is that a baby requires stability, safety, warmth, and a general absence of people trying to murder its father. You can offer precisely none of these things. John looked down at Harry, who had resumed attacking the bread roll with the focused determination of a siege engineer. He was in a dumpster, Winston. Yes. And there are agencies, proper agencies, with proper people who handle these situations. Social services, hospitals, orphanages, if it comes to that. The blanket he was wrapped in, it wasn't a hospital blanket, it was handmade, expensive. And someone put him in a dumpster behind this hotel specifically, behind the Continental. That caught Winston's attention. His eyes narrowed slightly. You think he was left here deliberately? Someone wanted him found by someone in our world, or someone wanted him to disappear. Either way, if I hand him to social services, whoever put him there might come looking. Or might not. I don't gamble. Winston was quiet for a long time. He watched the baby. Harry had given up on the bread roll and was now reaching for Winston's pocket square with the single-minded avarice of a tiny drunk. He has a scar, Winston said. Yes, on his forehead. The doctor says it's unusual. Not a normal wound, number it wouldn't be. Winston's voice had changed. Something had clicked behind his eyes, some piece of information slotting into place. He was quiet for another moment and then he stood up abruptly. Don't go anywhere, I need to make a call. Winston, don't go anywhere, Jonathan. He left. John looked at Harry. Harry looked at John. The bread roll had been reduced to a saliva-soaked ruin. You need more bread, John said. Harry made a sound that might have been agreement. Winston came back 2 hours later with a woman. She was tall and angular, somewhere between 50 and 70 in the way that certain women managed, ageless through sheer force of will. Her hair was steel gray, pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a long, dark coat that looked like it had been in fashion at some point in the past and had simply decided to remain there through stubbornness. She moved like a person who expected doors to open for her and walls to get out of her way. John, Winston said, this is Marlowe. Just Marlowe, John asked. Just Marlowe, the woman said. Her voice was dry and British and carried the weight of someone who was used to being the most intelligent person in any room she entered. She looked at John the way a surgeon looks at an X-ray, clinically, thoroughly, with zero concern for his feeling. Then she looked at Harry, who was asleep on the bed in a fortress of pillows, and something in her expression shifted. She crossed the room and stood over the baby. She didn't touch him. She just looked, and her eyes went to the scar immediately, and she was very still for a very long time. Oh, she said softly. Oh, you poor little thing. You know what that scar means, John said. It wasn't a question. Marlowe turned to face him. Yes, I do. She looked at Winston. Where did you find her? Marlowe was a member of a community that exists parallel to ours, Winston said carefully. A community with certain capabilities. She's a witch, John said. Winston blinked. Marlowe actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. No point in being delicate, I suppose, she said. Yes, Mr. Wick, I'm a witch, retired as much as anyone in my position retires. I left the magical world 20 years ago after a series of disagreements with its governing body that I won't bore you with. I've been operating in the margins since then, close enough to your world to stay hidden from mine. Winston has used my services on occasion. Occasional consultation, Winston said smoothly. And the baby, John said. Marlowe sat on the edge of the bed carefully, not disturbing Harry's sleep. This baby is Harry Potter. He's the son of James and Lily Potter, who were, as of 3 days ago, murdered by a dark wizard named Lord Voldemort. The name meant nothing to John, and his face showed it. Voldemort is the most feared dark wizard in a century. He waged a war against the magical world for over a decade, terrorist campaign essentially. He targeted the Potters specifically because of a prophecy, the details of which I don't fully know. He went to their home on Halloween night. He killed James first. Then Lily, and then he turned his wand on the baby. She paused. The rain had stopped outside, and the sudden silence made the room feel smaller. He tried to kill a baby, John said. His voice was flat, quiet, the kind of quiet that people who knew John Wick knew to be afraid of. Yes, and it didn't work. The killing curse, the one spell that has no counter, no shield, no defense, rebounded. It destroyed Voldemort, or his body at least. That scar is where the curse struck. Harry Potter is, as of 72 hours ago, the most famous child in the magical world. They're calling him the boy who lived. The room was very quiet. Who put him in the dumpster? John asked. That I don't know. The magical community's leadership, a man named Albus Dumbledore, was supposed to have placed the child with relatives. Muggle relatives, non-magical. If the child ended up here instead, Marlowe trailed off. Either something went wrong with the placement, or someone intercepted the child and decided to dispose of him. There are still Voldemort's followers out there. Death Eaters, they call themselves. If one of them got to the boy before Dumbledore's people did, they threw him in the trash. They'd have wanted him dead and untraceable. A Muggle dumpster behind a Muggle hotel, they wouldn't have known what the Continental is. They'd have thought he'd simply freeze to death and be found by garbage men. John looked at the sleeping baby. Scar on his forehead was a thin red line against the pale skin, already looking less raw than it had the night before. What happens if I give him back to this Dumbledore? Marlowe hesitated. He'd be placed with his mother's sister, a Muggle family in Surrey, I believe. He'd grow up outside the magical world until he's old enough for school. And the Death Eaters, Dumbledore would protect him. He's a powerful wizard, the most powerful alive, many would say. He didn't protect the parents. That landed in the room like a brick. Marlowe's expression tightened. Winston shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. No, Marlowe said, he didn't. And you said there's a prophecy. About this baby, yes, so he's a target. For the rest of his life, people will come for him. Almost certainly, John nodded. He picked up the glass of water on the nightstand and took a drink and set it back down. Then he stays with me. Winston started to speak. John looked at him and Winston stopped. Jonathan, he's a target, Winston. Targets need protection. I can protect him. You can protect him from bullets, from knives, from the things in our world. You cannot protect him from magic. Then I'll learn. He looked at Marlowe. You'll teach me, and when he's old enough, you'll teach him. Marlowe studied him for a long, searching moment. You're serious. I'm always serious. Raising a magical child with a target on his back and the fate of an entire hidden society apparently resting on his shoulders in the heart of the assassin underworld. You understand how insane that sounds? Yes, she kept studying him. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found it, because something in her posture relaxed, not much, but enough. He'll need training, not just your kind. His magic will manifest whether we want it to or not, and untrained magic in a child is dangerous, to him and everyone around him. Then we train him, and when the magical world comes looking, and they will, eventually, what then? Then they find a boy who can take care of himself. Marlowe looked at Winston. Winston looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who knew he was going to regret this but had already resigned himself to it. Well, Marlowe said, I suppose I'm coming out of retirement. The years moved the way years do when they're full, quickly, and in fragments. Harry took his first steps in the Continental's lobby, on the marble floor between the front desk and the bar, with Karen watching from behind the counter and 2 Belarusian contract killers applauding from their bar stools. He fell twice and got up 3 times, because the third time he hadn't actually fallen, he just decided the floor looked interesting. John watched from across the room with the expression of a man experiencing an emotion he didn't have a name for. By 3, Harry was talking in full sentences. Short ones. He'd inherited John's economy with words, or absorbed it by proximity. He called John Dad because that's what he was, and he called Karen Uncle Karen because that's what Karen had become, and he called Winston Mr. Winston because Winston had insisted on it, and Harry was polite when politeness was warranted. The Continental staff adapted. They adapted because adapting was what they did, and because the alternative was explaining to John Wick why his son wasn't welcome. Housekeeping kept a supply of children's books in the linen closet. The kitchen learned to make peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles, which was the only configuration Harry would accept. Karen, who had never been seen reading anything other than the Hotel Registry and the Financial Times, was discovered one evening reading Where the Wild Things Are to a drowsy Harry behind the front desk, and he handled the discovery with his usual dignity, which meant he continued reading without acknowledging that anyone had seen him. John bought an apartment. A real one, not the Spartan, weapons-cached safe house he'd maintained downtown, but an actual home. 3 bedrooms on the Upper West Side with windows that let in actual light. He kept the safe house too, because he was still John Wick and the world hadn't gotten any safer, but the apartment was where Harry learned to walk without shoes on hardwood floors and to eat breakfast at a table, and to fall asleep to the sound of the city outside his window. The training started early. Not because John was cruel or obsessive, but because training was the language he spoke, and it was the best gift he knew how to give. At 3, Harry learned to fall, to tuck his chin and roll and turn impact into motion. At 4, he learned to move, balance work, footwork, the basics of spatial awareness. John didn't put a weapon in his hands, not yet. What he gave him was foundation, the ability to understand his body as a tool, to trust it, to know what it could do. Marlowe came 3 times a week. She arrived at the apartment in her long, dark coat with a leather bag that was larger on the inside than the outside, a fact that Harry accepted with the matter-of-fact ease of a child who didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. She taught him about magic the way a language is taught to a child, by immersion, not by instruction. She didn't give him a wand, she didn't teach him spells. What she did was build a framework in his mind, an understanding that magic was not separate from him but part of him, like his bones, like his breath. The magical world teaches children that magic comes from wands, she told John one evening while Harry slept in the next room. That spells are recipes, say the right words, make the right gesture, and the magic happens. It's a useful system, efficient, but it's also a cage. It teaches children that their power is external, that it lives in a stick of wood and needs Latin words to wake up. The truth is that the wand is a focus, nothing more. The magic is in him, has been since before he was born. Can he control it? Not yet, but he will, because we're going to teach him that his magic is his, not his wands, not his schools, not his governments, his. She was right about the control, or rather, she was right that it would come. It didn't come smoothly. Harry was 5 years old the first time his magic truly manifested. John had set up a training area in the apartment's basement, mats on the floor, a heavy bag, a speed bag, a section of wall padded for impact work. Harry had been working on a basic combination, jab, cross, slip, on a small bag John had hung at his height. He was focused, intense, his small face set in concentration, and he was getting it wrong. The cross kept drifting wide, his feet kept tangling. He tried again and missed and tried again and missed, and the frustration built the way it builds in children, fast, total, overwhelming. The heavy bag exploded, not fell, not tore, exploded. The canvas ripped apart in a burst of sand and filling that sprayed across the room, and the chain that held it snapped clean, and the ceiling bracket tore out of the concrete in a shower of dust. The force of it knocked Harry backward onto the mats, and when John came down the stairs 3 seconds later, he'd heard the boom from the kitchen. He found Harry sitting on the floor surrounded by a blizzard of sand and shredded canvas, eyes wide, hands shaking. "Dad," Harry said, his voice was small, "I broke it." John looked at the devastation. He looked at his son. He crouched down. "That's okay," he said, "we'll get a new one." "But Harry," John put his hands on the boy's shoulders. "Steady, anchoring. You have something inside you, something strong. It's going to come out sometimes, especially when you're angry or frustrated or scared. That's normal. That's yours. Marlowe says it's magic. It is magic, and like anything powerful, you need to learn to use it, not fight it, use it. What if I can't? You can. You know how I know. How? Because you're my son, and we don't quit." Harry looked at him with those eyes, green, Marlowe had told him, Lily Potter's eyes, though John had never known Lily Potter and didn't care. They were Harry's eyes, and right now they were scared and hopeful and trusting in the way that only a child's eyes can be. "Okay, Dad, okay. Now help me clean this up." They cleaned it up together. John ordered a new heavy bag, a reinforced one. Harry destroyed that one too 8 months later, but he did it on purpose that time, and he was grinning when he did it. Marlowe's training intensified as Harry grew. By 6, he could feel his magic the way a musician feels rhythm. It was always there, a low hum in his chest, a warmth in his hands. She taught him to push it outward in controlled bursts, to move objects, to create light, to shield himself. It wasn't like what Hogwarts would teach, she told him. It was older, rawer. It came from a tradition that predated wands and schools and ministries, from a time when magic was a wild thing that lived in the land and the blood and the bone. "You'll learn their way too, eventually," she said. "Wand magic, formal spells. It has its uses, precision, repeatability, range, but what we're building here is the foundation underneath all of that. When the wand breaks, when the words fail, when everything goes sideways, and in your life, Harry, things will go sideways, this is what you'll fall back on, your magic, yours." Harry absorbed it the way he absorbed everything, quietly, completely, and with an intensity that sometimes unnerved even Marlowe. He didn't ask many questions. He practiced until he got it right, and then he practiced more. John's influence was obvious, the discipline, the repetition, the understanding that mastery wasn't a destination but a direction. By 7, Harry could throw a proper punch and summon fire in his palm. By 8, he could spar with adults twice his size, using speed and technique to compensate for mass, and he could shield himself with wandless magic strong enough to stop a thrown chair. By 9, he could disassemble and reassemble a Glock 19 in under 60 seconds, and could levitate himself 6 feet off the ground for 10 seconds before the concentration became too much. John watched it all with the quiet, fierce pride of a man who had given everything he had to give and was seeing it take root. The assassin world knew about Harry. It was impossible to keep him a secret. John Wick had a son, and the underworld ran on information, but the world also understood certain things implicitly. John Wick's son was off limits, not because anyone said so, not because there was a decree or a ruling, but because everyone who existed in that world could do the simple math. Threatening John Wick's child meant bringing down the full, unbridled fury of the Baba Yaga on yourself and everyone you'd ever loved. It was suicide with extra steps. Nobody was that stupid. The director reached out when Harry was 8. She ran the Ruska Roma, the organization that had raised John, trained him, and given him to the Tarasov Syndicate as a young man. She was a woman of enormous power and zero sentiment, and she ran her school the way a general runs an army. She sent a message through channels, the old way, a coin and a card, hand-delivered to the Continental. "She wants the boy for Summers," John told Winston, turning the coin over in his fingers. "Of course she does. She sees what everyone sees, a prodigy with an unusual skill set being raised by the most dangerous man in our world. She wants to sharpen him, or own him, that too. But John, the director's training is the best there is. What she teaches can't be learned anywhere else. The blade work alone is worth the risk. I don't like debts. Then don't incur one. Go with him. She can hardly refuse. You're her greatest success story. Go with the boy, supervise the training, and leave when summer's over. No debts, no obligations." John went. He took Harry to the Ruska-Roma's training grounds, a sprawling estate in the Belarusian countryside that looked like a boarding school and operated like a special forces camp. The director met them at the gate. She looked at John the way she always looked at him, with the proprietary satisfaction of a sculptor examining her best work. Then she looked at Harry. Harry looked back at her. He was 8 years old and small for his age, and his green eyes were calm and unblinking. "He has your stillness," the director said. "He has his own." The director smiled. It was not a warm smile. "We'll see." The summer was brutal. Harry trained alongside children who had been in the program since birth, children who would grow up to be killers and thieves and ghosts. They were good. Harry was better. Not in everything, not yet. Some of them had years of specialized training that he hadn't, but in the way he learned, the speed at which he adapted, the strange and terrifying integration of his physical skills with something else. Something the other children didn't have and couldn't understand. There was an incident in the second week. An older boy, 14, who had been the best in his cohort and resented the attention the newcomer was getting. He cornered Harry behind the weapons shed, and the details of what happened varied depending on who told the story, but the outcome was consistent. Harry put the older boy on the ground with a hip throw he'd learned from John, and when two of the boy's friends jumped in, the air around Harry crackled and all three of them were thrown backward into the wall of the shed hard enough to crack the boards. The director watched the surveillance footage in her office. She played it back 3 times. Then she looked at John, who was standing by the window. "What is he?" she asked. "He's my son." "That's not what I asked. That's the only answer you're getting." The director considered pushing. She looked at John's face and decided against it. Harry went back every summer for 3 years. He learned blade work, knives, short swords, the brutal efficiency of Eastern European close-quarters combat. He learned movement, parkour, climbing, the art of navigating urban environments at speed. And he learned something that John had hoped he wouldn't need but knew he would: how to survive when everything was trying to kill you. The first time Harry killed someone, he was 12 years old. It happened at the apartment on a Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon. John was out, a meeting with Winston, something about a marker that had come due. Harry was home with a book and a glass of orange juice and the comfortable silence of a place where he felt safe. The man came through the window. He was professional, black clothing, suppressed weapon, the quiet competence of someone who had done this before, but he made 2 mistakes. The first was that he assumed a 12-year-old home alone was a soft target. The second was that he stood silhouetted against the window light for a half-second too long. Harry felt him before he saw him. The magic registered the threat the way a spider's web registers a vibration: instant, total, precise. Harry was off the couch and behind the kitchen island before the man had cleared the window frame, and when the man came around the island with his weapon up, Harry didn't hesitate. He hit the man's gun hand with a telekinetic strike that broke his wrist and sent the weapon skittering across the floor. The man swore and grabbed for a knife with his other hand, and Harry closed the distance, 3 steps, fast, low, and drove the heel of his palm into the man's solar plexus with a force that shouldn't have been possible for a child his size but was, because Harry's strikes carried more than just physical power. The man doubled over. Harry grabbed the knife from his loosened grip, reversed it, and put it through the man's throat. It was fast, clinical, the way John had trained him. The man went down and didn't get up, and Harry stood over the body with blood on his hands and his heart beating hard and fast, and the kitchen was very quiet. He called John. "Dad, Harry, what's wrong?" Someone came to the apartment, through the window. Silence. Then, "Are you hurt?" "Number, is he down?" "Yes." "Is he alive?" Harry looked at the man on the floor, at the handle of the knife and the spreading red beneath him. "Number, I'm coming home. Don't touch anything else. Sit somewhere you can see the door and the window. If anyone else comes in, you do what you have to do." "Okay, Dad." John was there in 11 minutes. He came through the door with a weapon in each hand and swept the apartment in 20 seconds, and then he was in the kitchen and he was looking at the body and he was looking at Harry. Harry was sitting on the kitchen counter. His hands were washed. He'd done that automatically, but there was still blood on his shirt. His face was pale and set and his eyes were dry. John holstered his weapons. He walked to Harry and stood in front of him and put his hand on the back of his son's neck. "You did good," he said. "I killed him. You survived. There's a difference between killing and murdering. He came into our home. He came for you. You defended yourself." "I know." Harry's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking just slightly, the way hands do when adrenaline starts to ebb. "I know all that. It was fast. I didn't even think about it. It was just I moved and then he was dead. That's training. Is that what it feels like for you?" John was quiet for a moment. "Every time," he said, "and it never gets easier." "It shouldn't get easier. The day it gets easy is the day you've lost something you can't get back." Harry looked at his father. "Has it gotten easy for you?" "Number, not once." John squeezed the back of his neck gently. Now come on, we need to clean this up and find out who sent him. They cleaned it up. John called a crew, men who specialized in making problems disappear, and within an hour the kitchen floor was clean, the window was repaired, and the body was gone. The man was identified through Continental channels as a low-level contract runner working for a faction of Death Eaters who had, apparently, never fully accepted that Voldemort was gone and had been quietly searching for Harry Potter for years. John passed the information to Marlowe, who passed it through her own channel. Within a week, the cell was dismantled, not by John, but by the Continental's network, because Winston considered an unsanctioned hit on the child of a Continental-affiliated member to be a violation of professional courtesy, and Winston took professional courtesy seriously. Harry didn't talk about the killing again. Not because he was suppressing it, but because he'd processed it the way he processed everything internally, thoroughly, and with the unsettling maturity of a child who had been raised in a world where death was not abstract but present. Marlowe noticed the change in him. Not a hardening, Harry had always been hard, in the way that well-forged steel is hard, but a settling. Certainty, he's not a child anymore, she told John. Not really, not in the ways that matter. He's 12. He's 12 and he's killed a man and he's carrying it the way you carry yours, close, quiet, under control. That's not childhood, John, that's something else. He's still my son. Of course he is, but he's also something I don't have a word for. A wizard trained by assassins, a killer with magic in his blood. There's never been anything like him, John, not in my world and not in yours. John didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what Harry was. He'd been building him since that night in the rain. The letter came on Harry's 11th birthday. Not the killing, that was a year later. The letter. Marlowe had warned them it would come. In the magical world, every witch and wizard received a letter of acceptance to a magical school at age 11. In Britain, that school was Hogwarts. The letter would find him, Marlowe said, no matter where he was, no matter what protections were in place. The magic was old and absolute. It arrived by owl. Harry was eating breakfast at the Continental. He and John had stayed the night after a training session that had run late. Karen was behind the desk. The lobby was quiet, empty except for a Finnish woman drinking coffee and reading a newspaper with the focused intensity of someone who was memorizing it rather than reading it. The owl came through an open window on the second-floor mezzanine, circled the lobby once with the unhurried confidence of a creature that knew exactly where it was going, and landed on the bar next to Harry's plate. It was a tawny owl, medium-sized, with amber eyes and an expression of professional detachment. It had a letter in its beak. Harry looked at the owl looked at Harry. The Finnish woman looked at both of them and went back to her newspaper because she was a guest of the Continental and nothing surprised her. Dad, Harry said. John was 3 stools down, drinking coffee. He looked at the owl, he looked at the letter, he looked at Harry. That's it, that's it. Harry took the letter. The owl ruffled its feathers, accepted a piece of bacon from Harry's plate as payment, and departed through the same window it had entered. The envelope was heavy parchment, yellowish, sealed with a wax crest, a coat of arms with a lion, a snake, a badger, and an eagle. Harry's name and address were written on the front in emerald green ink in a flowing hand that managed to be both elegant and fussy. Mr. H. Potter, the bar, ground floor, the Continental Hotel, New York City. They know where I am, Harry said. They know where you are, John confirmed. Harry opened the letter. He read it once quickly and then again slowly. Then he handed it to John. John read it. It was an acceptance letter to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, signed by a Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress. It detailed the start of term, the supplies required, and the method of response, return owl. John set the letter down on the bar. He picked up his coffee. He drank. He set it down. Marlowe says it's the best magical school in the world. Marlowe says it's in Scotland. Yes, that's far. It is. John looked at his son. Harry was 11 years old. He was small for his age, wiry, compact, built like a greyhound. His dark hair was perpetually messy in a way that no amount of discipline could fix, and his green eyes, behind round glasses he'd needed since he was 7, were calm and clear and looking at John with the quiet patience of someone who already knew what the answer was going to be but was giving his father the space to get there on his own. You want to go, John said. Marlowe says there are things I can only learn there. Wand magic. Formal theory, history. I'm not asking what Marlowe says, I'm asking what you want. Harry was quiet for a moment. I want to go, I want to see what I am, where I come from, what that world is, and... He paused. The man who killed my birth parents, Voldemort. Marlowe says he's not really dead, that he'll come back someday. And you want to be ready. I'm already ready, but I want to be ready on their ground. I want to know their world the way I know ours. John looked at his son for a long time. He saw the boy who had gripped his lapel in a rainy alley. He He saw the child who had destroyed a heavy bag with raw magic. He saw the young man who had killed to defend himself and carried it with grace. He saw someone he had built piece by piece, day by day, with every ounce of everything he had. "Okay," he said. Harry nodded, not surprised. He'd known. John picked up his bourbon. He'd switched from coffee at some point during the conversation, which told Harry everything about what this decision was costing him. He took a long sip, set it down. "We'll need supplies," he said. "The letter has a list. Robes, books, a wand, a cauldron. We'll go to London. Marlowe can show us where. Diagon Alley." "Right." John turned the glass slowly on the bar. "Harry." "Yeah, Dad." John looked at him. His dark eyes were steady and deep and full of something that John Wick almost never showed and that Harry had learned over 11 years to recognize as the closest thing John had to tenderness. "Remember who you are," Harry smiled. It was a rare thing, not because he was unhappy, but because he was sparing with it in the way that John was sparing with words, and when it came, it meant something. "A Wick," he said. "That's right." John finished his bourbon. Harry finished his breakfast. The owl was gone and the letter lay on the bar between them, and the morning sun came through the Continental's high windows and made the marble floor glow like something almost holy. Behind the desk, Karen folded a handkerchief he didn't need to fold, and if his eyes were slightly brighter than usual, no one mentioned it. Because at the Continental, you noticed everything and said nothing. That was the code, and the code was what mattered. Chapter 2, Diagon Alley doesn't know what's coming. The flight to London was 7 hours, and Harry spent 4 of them reading. Not the Hogwarts letter, he'd memorized that within minutes of receiving it. He was reading a dossier that Marlowe had prepared, 46 pages of handwritten notes on the magical world's political structure, its major players, its history, and its weak points. Marlowe wrote the way she spoke, precise, opinionated, and with the occasional aside that dripped acid. Her entry on the Ministry of Magic read, "Bureaucratic apparatus staffed largely by incompetents and cowards, governed by whoever happens to be least offensive to the largest number of people at any given moment. Think of the DMV, but with wands and a dress code from 1740. Her entry on Albus Dumbledore was longer and more careful. "The most powerful wizard alive. Defeated the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945. Chief warlock of the Wisengamot, supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, headmaster of Hogwarts. Brilliant, charismatic, manipulative. Genuinely believes he acts for the greater good, which makes him more dangerous than someone who knows they're selfish. He will try to control you. He will do it with kindness and wisdom and the appearance of grandfatherly concern, and he will be so good at it that you won't feel the leash until it's already around your neck. Respect him. Learn from him. Do not trust him with your autonomy." Harry read that passage twice. John sat in the window seat beside him, eyes closed, breathing steady. He wasn't asleep. John didn't sleep on planes. He rested, which was a different thing, a state of reduced activity that kept his body still and his mind at a low hum, ready to spin up at the first wrong sound. His suit was charcoal, no tie, the top button of his shirt open. He looked like a businessman on a red-eye. He looked like exactly what he was not. Under John's seat was a black leather bag that contained, among other things, a change of clothes, a passport in a name that wasn't John Wick, and absolutely no weapons. They were going through customs at Heathrow, and John was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He had contacts in London who would provide what he needed once they landed. The Continental's London branch had already been notified. Harry closed the dossier and looked out the window. The Atlantic was black and featureless below them, and the cabin lights were dimmed, and the other passengers were sleeping or pretending to. He caught his own reflection in the glass, a thin-faced boy with messy black hair and round glasses and green eyes that looked, in the dim light, older than 11. "Dad, Marlowe's notes on Voldemort. She says he made something called Horcruxes." John opened his eyes. "She mentioned that to me, soul containers. She says that's why he's not really dead. He split his soul and hid the pieces. As long as the pieces exist, he can come back. That's what she believes, yes, my scar." Harry touched it without thinking, a habit he'd never been able to break, the way some people touch a lucky coin. "She thinks one of the pieces might be in me." John was quiet for a moment. This was not new information to him. Marlowe had raised the possibility 2 years ago, privately, in a conversation that had ended with John standing at his apartment window for a long time, saying nothing. "She thinks it's possible," John said, "not certain. If it's true, then we deal with it, the way we deal with everything. You can't shoot a piece of someone's soul, Dad. But there are people who know how to handle it. Marlowe is looking into it. She has contacts in the magical world who specialize in this kind of thing. Curse breakers, that's what she calls them." Harry turned back to the window. "I'm not afraid of it. I know you're not. I just want to know. I want to understand what I'm carrying." John reached over and squeezed the back of Harry's neck, that gesture, their gesture, the one that said everything without words. Harry leaned into it slightly, the way he'd done since he was small, and for a moment he was just a boy on a plane with his father, going on a trip. Then the moment passed, and he opened the dossier again, and his eyes were sharp and focused, and he was something else entirely. They landed at Heathrow at 6 in the morning, London time. The city was doing its London thing, grey sky, damp air, the particular British quality of light that made everything look like a photograph taken through a dirty window. They cleared customs without incident. John's passport identified him as Jonathan Wick, American businessman, and the customs officer didn't look twice, because John had the kind of quiet, well-dressed authority that made bureaucrats want to wave you through. A car was waiting. Black sedan, tinted windows, driven by a man named Davies who worked for the London Continental and had the particular blankness of expression that marked him as staff. He drove them into the city without speaking, navigating the morning traffic with professional ease, and deposited them at the Stafford London, a hotel in St. James's Place that was, like most things in John's world, not what it appeared to be. Officially, it was a luxury hotel for discerning guests. Unofficially, it maintained a reciprocal arrangement with the Continental Network, which meant that certain guests received certain courtesies that weren't in the brochure. Their suite was on the 4th floor. 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, and a view of Green Park that was doing its best to be charming despite the weather. John checked the rooms, windows, doors, sight lines, exits in the automatic, methodical way that Harry had grown up watching and had long since learned to replicate. Harry checked them too, independently, and they compared notes without speaking, a glance and a nod that confirmed the space was clean. Marlowe said to meet her at 11, Harry said, pulling the curtains open. A pub called the Leaky Cauldron, that's the entrance to Diagon Alley. A pub. The magical world's idea of security is hiding things in places muggles wouldn't notice. A dingy pub between 2 shops that non-magical people's eyes just slide over. Apparently it's been there since the 1500s, and no one's ever noticed. Magic, mug-repelling charms, if you don't know it's there, your brain just edits it out. You see an empty storefront or a boarded-up shop. John considered this. Will it work on me? Marlowe says probably not. You've been around magic for 10 years, your mind's adapted, but she wants to be there just in case. John nodded. He picked up the phone and made a call, brief in Russian, to a number that Harry didn't recognize. When he hung up, he said, "We have a stop to make first." The stop was a tailor's shop in Savile Row. Not an actual tailor's shop, or rather, it was an actual tailor's shop, because cover businesses worked best when they were real businesses, but it also served as a discreet point of contact for the Continental's London operations. The tailor was a small, precise man named Hargrove who measured John for a suit he didn't need, and in the process, handed him a flat leather case that John slipped inside his jacket without comment. Harry watched from a chair by the window, flipping through a copy of the Financial Times that was 3 days old. "Fitting well, sir?" Hargrove asked, adjusting a lapel that didn't need adjusting. "Perfect," John said. They left. John's posture had shifted almost imperceptibly, the leather case under his jacket changing the geometry of his movement by fractions of a degree. Harry noticed. He always noticed. "Feel better?" Harry asked as they walked. "I feel dressed." Harry almost smiled. The Leaky Cauldron was exactly as described, a small, dark pub wedged between a bookshop and a record store on Charing Cross Road, and John could see it. Not easily his eyes wanted to slide past it, the way your eyes slide past a crack in a wall, but he could feel the resistance, and pushing through, it was like pushing through a curtain of warm water. One moment the pub wasn't there, and the next it was, with a hanging sign and a door that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the Tudors. Marlowe was waiting outside, her long coat buttoned to the throat, a cigarette between her fingers that she extinguished when she saw them. "You found it," she said to John. "I wasn't sure you would. I can see it. Interesting. Most muggles can't, even with prolonged magical exposure. You might have a touch of sensitivity yourself, Mr. Wick. Or you're simply too stubborn to be fooled. Let's go with that." Marlowe looked at Harry. "Ready?" "Yes. Remember what I told you. In there, you're Harry Potter, the boy who lived. Every witch and wizard in Britain knows your name and thinks they know your story. They'll stare. They'll want to shake your hand and tell you where they were the night Voldemort fell. Let them. Smile. Be polite. Give them nothing. I know how to work a room, Marlowe. You know how to work a room full of assassins. This is different. These people are civilians. They're sentimental. They see you as a symbol, not a person. That makes them unpredictable." "She's right," John said. Harry looked at his father. "Since when do you agree with anyone?" "Since she started being right." Marlowe's mouth twitched. "Shall we?" They went in. The Leaky Cauldron's interior was dim and smoky and smelled like old beer, and something herbal that Harry's trained senses couldn't immediately identify. The ceiling was low, the furniture was dark wood scarred by centuries of use, and the clientele was unusual. Men and women in robes of various colors and states of repair sat at tables drinking from tankards and goblets. A woman near the fire had a small creature on her shoulder that appeared to be a lizard made of living flame. An old man at the bar was reading a newspaper whose photographs moved. John took it in with a single sweep, exits 2 visible, one behind the bar, one at the back, occupants 14, plus the barman, threat level low but unfamiliar. His hand didn't move toward the leather case under his jacket, but it didn't move away either. The barman was a stooped, bald man with a face like a friendly walnut. He looked up as they entered, and his eyes went to Harry, and his expression went through a rapid sequence, confusion, recognition, shock, and something close to reverence, in about 1.5 seconds. "Bless my soul," he whispered. "Harry Potter." The pub went quiet. Not the slow, gradual quiet of a conversation winding down, but the sudden, total quiet of 14 people simultaneously stopping what they were doing. Heads turned, chairs scraped. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the stone floor, and nobody looked at it. Harry stood in the doorway of the leaky cauldron, flanked by John Wick and Marlowe, and 14 witches and wizards stared at him with an intensity that would have been alarming if he hadn't been raised in rooms full of people who killed for a living. He smiled, polite, controlled. The smile Karen had taught him, the one that invited warmth without offering access. "Hello," he said. The dam broke. They came at him in a wave, handshakes and tears and babbling introductions. Daedalus Diggle, who bowed so hard his hat fell off. Doris Crockford, who shook his hand 11 times. A pale young man in a purple turban who hung back near the wall and didn't approach but watched with dark, nervous eyes. Harry clocked him immediately, filed him, moved on. John stood slightly behind Harry and to his left, watching. His body language was relaxed and his expression was neutral, and he was cataloging every person in the room with the precision of a combat computer. The pale young man in the turban interested him. There was something off about the way he held himself, a tension in the shoulders, a flicker in the eyes, the particular stillness of someone who was working very hard to appear calm. "Who's the man in the turban?" John murmured to Marlowe. "I don't know, staff possibly. Hogwarts employs various professors. He's watching Harry. Everyone is watching Harry. Not like that." Marlowe glanced at the man. He had pressed himself against the wall and was gripping his tankard with both hands, and there was something in his posture, something tight and coiled, that didn't match the rest of the pub's atmosphere of giddy celebration. "I'll look into it," she said. The crowd eventually exhausted itself, and the barman Tom, his name was, led them to the back courtyard, a small, walled space with a garbage bin and nothing else. He tapped a sequence of bricks with a wand he produced from his apron, and the wall opened. It didn't open like a door. It opened like a flower, bricks folding and rearranging themselves, pulling apart to reveal an archway, and beyond the archway, a cobblestone street that stretched away into a world that should not have been able to exist in the middle of London but very clearly did. Diagon Alley. John looked at it. Harry looked at it. John's expression didn't change. Harry's didn't either. Marlowe watched both of them and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, the particular satisfaction of showing something extraordinary to people who had the capacity to appreciate it without being overwhelmed by it. "Well," she said, "shall we shop?" The alley was chaos, not the bad kind, the bright, bewildering, sensory overload kind. It was narrow and winding and packed with shops that had no business existing, and people who had no business dressing like that, and sounds and smells that came at you from every direction without apology. Cauldrons stacked outside an apothecary, owls hooting from a shop called Eolips. A window display of broomsticks with a cluster of children pressed against the glass. Robes, books, wands, potions, ingredients, telescopes, scales, crystal vials, and 100 other things that Harry's analytical mind was cataloging, even as his 11-year-old self wanted to stop and look at all of it. He didn't stop. He walked the way John had taught him to walk in unfamiliar environments, steady pace, eyes moving, taking in the architecture and the flow of foot traffic, and the layout of the street with the unconscious efficiency of someone mapping a mission site. John walked beside him and did the same thing, and if the witches and wizards of Diagon Alley noticed that the tall, dark-haired muggle in the expensive suit was assessing their quaint shopping district with the eyes of a special operations soldier, they didn't show it. "Gringotts first," Marlowe said. "You'll need money, and there are things in the Potter vault that you should see." The bank was impossible to miss. It dominated the far end of the alley, a massive white marble building that lined at an angle that defied physics and architecture simultaneously. Bronze doors flanked by, Harry looked twice, small, sharp-featured creatures in uniforms of scarlet and gold, standing at attention with an intensity that suggested they took their guard duty personally. Goblins, Marlowe said. Armed, John asked. Always. Gringotts is goblin territory. Their rules, their security. The goblins have a complicated relationship with wizarding society, centuries of wars, treaties, and mutual distrust. They control the banking system, which gives them power, but they're treated as second-class citizens, which gives them resentment. Be respectful. They respond to directness and despise flattery. Good, John said. I don't flatter. They climbed the steps. The goblin guards watched them with small, dark, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. John met their gaze steadily. One of the goblins, the older one, looked at John for a long moment and then inclined his head, a fraction of a degree, barely visible. John returned it identically. Some things were universal. Inside, Gringotts was vast and cold, and operated with the ruthless efficiency of an institution that had been handling money for 1,000 years and had no patience for anyone who wasted its time. Long counters of dark wood stretched the length of the hall, staffed by goblins on high stools, weighing coins and examining gems and writing in ledgers with quills that moved faster than the eye could track. Marlowe led them to a counter at the far end, where a particularly ancient goblin was examining a ruby through a jeweler's loupe with an expression of professional disgust. "We're here for the Potter Vault," Marlowe said. The goblin lowered his loupe. His eyes, small and black and shrewd, moved from Marlowe to Harry. They lingered on the scar. "Key," he said. "I don't have a key," Harry said. "Then you don't have a vault." "I have a scar," Harry said, "and a name, Harry Potter." "I was told there would be a vault." The goblin looked at him. Harry looked back. The silence between them had a weight and a texture, and Harry held it with the ease of someone who had sat across from the director of the Ruska Roma and not blinked. "Blood verification," the goblin said finally. "Standard procedure for keyless access. You'll need to provide a drop of blood on an identity parchment. If you are who you say you are, the vault will recognize you." "Fine." "It will also reveal any magical properties, bindings, or anomalies associated with your person. Do you consent to a full reading?" Harry glanced at Marlowe, who gave a fractional nod. "Yes." The goblin produced a sheet of parchment and a silver knife, small, ceremonial, with a blade that gleamed with something that wasn't ordinary sharpness. He placed both on the counter. Harry picked up the knife, pricked his index finger without hesitation. The cut was precise, minimal, the habit of someone who'd handled blades since childhood, and let a single drop of blood fall onto the parchment. The blood hit the paper and spread. Not the way blood normally spreads, it moved with purpose, flowing outward in thin lines that formed letters, then words, then entire paragraphs of text in dark red ink. The parchment glowed faintly as it worked, and the goblin leaned forward with an interest that was no longer entirely professional. The text settled. The goblin read it. His eyebrows, already prominent, climbed higher. "Well," he said. "What does it say?" Harry asked. The goblin turned the parchment around. Harry read it. John, standing behind him, read it over his shoulder. "Harry James Potter, born July 31, 1980. Parents: James Fleamont Potter, deceased. Lily Jane Potter née Evans, deceased. Guardian, magical. None registered guardian, legal muggle. John Wick, blood adopted, 1982. Harry paused on that. Blood adopted. He looked at John. John's expression didn't change, but Harry could read the minute shifts, the slight tightening around the eyes, the fractional set of the jaw. Marlowe had performed a ritual when Harry was 2, a blood-bonding ceremony from an old tradition, one that the mainstream magical world didn't practice anymore. It had made John and Harry family in a way that magic recognized, even if no wizard's court had sanctioned it. The text continued. "Heir to the noble and most ancient house of Potter, Vault 687, Trust Vault, accessible Vault 12, Family Vault, accessible at majority or with guardian consent, estimated holdings. Details sealed, request formal audit." And then at the bottom, in text that was slightly different, darker, with an unsteady quality, as if the magic writing it was struggling. "Anomaly detected. Foreign magical signature embedded in scar tissue, forehead. Classification, soul fragment. Origin, Tom Marvolo riddle." The room got very quiet. Harry stared at the words, soul fragment. There it was in red and white, confirmed. The thing Marlowe had suspected but never proven. A piece of Voldemort, Tom Riddle, was lodged in his scar. Had been lodged there since he was 15 months old. He read the words again, then he looked up at the goblin. "You can detect this," Harry said. "This soul fragment, can you remove it?" Goblin's expression shifted into something that was almost respect. "Gringotts employs cursebreakers of considerable skill. Soul fragments, Horcruxes, are within their area of expertise. It would require examination, ritual preparation, and significant cost. How much? The examination alone would be 10,000 galleons, the removal, if feasible, substantially more. I don't know what a galleon is worth. Approximately £5 British, so £50,000 for the exam. What's in my trust vault? The goblin consulted a ledger. Vault 687 currently holds approximately 33,000 galleons. Your family vault holds considerably more. Harry looked at John. John looked at Harry. We'll schedule the examination, John said. It will require preparation. I'd suggest scheduling it for the winter holiday when the young Mr. Potter is available for an extended stay. The procedure, if we proceed to removal, would require several days of recovery. Set it up, Harry said. Whatever paperwork you need, whatever authorization, I want this thing out of me. The goblin inclined his head. It will be arranged. Now shall we visit your vault? The cart ride to the vault was a plummeting, careening descent through underground tunnels that would have been terrifying to anyone who hadn't spent summers training with the Ruska Roma. Harry leaned into the turns the way you lean into a fast car, his body adapting to the motion automatically. John sat beside him, perfectly still, one hand braced on the cart's rail, his expression suggesting that he'd ridden worse. Vault 687 opened to Harry's touch. The door recognized his blood, apparently the same way the parchment had. Inside was money. A lot of money. Gold coins, silver coins, bronze coins, piled in heaps that filled the small stone chamber. Harry had grown up in the Continental's orbit, where wealth was common and rarely discussed, so the sight of the gold didn't produce awe. What it produced was a practical calculation. How much do I need for school supplies? Perhaps 200 galleons would be more than sufficient, Marlowe said from behind him. Generous, in fact. Harry filled a leather pouch with gold and some silver. Marlowe explained the denominations, galleons, sickles, nuts, and they ascended back to the surface. At the counter, he arranged for the curse-breaking examination with the kind of focused, business-like efficiency that made the goblins look at him with an approval they rarely showed anyone who wasn't one of their own. As they left, the old goblin at the counter said something to a colleague in gobbledegook, a harsh, guttural language that Harry didn't understand. The colleague responded, and both of them looked at Harry's retreating back with expressions that, on goblin faces, were nearly warm. What did they say? Harry asked Marlowe once they were outside. I only caught part of it. Something about you being the first wizard to walk in there in decades who treated them like people instead of servants. They are people, yes, but you'd be surprised how many wizards forget that. They worked through the supply list with methodical efficiency. Madame Malkin's for robes. Harry stood on the fitting stool while enchanted tape measures zipped around him, and a blond boy on the next stool tried to start a conversation. Hogwarts too? The boy asked. He had a pointed face and a drawling voice and the particular posture of someone who had been told he was important from birth and had never thought to question it. Yes, Harry said. Know what house you'll be in? I'm going to be in Slytherin, of course. My whole family has been. Father says Dumbledore's the worst thing that's ever happened to the school. Do you know who your parents were? Harry looked at him. The boy was making conversation the way rich children do, establishing status, probing for hierarchy, sorting you into a category. Harry had seen it before. The Continental's world was full of people who needed to know where you stood before they'd decide how to treat you. I know who my parents were, Harry said. Were they, our kind? What kind is that? The boy hesitated, reading something in Harry's tone that he didn't quite understand. Wizarding families, proper ones. My father is the deadliest man alive, Harry said conversationally. Does that count? The boy opened his mouth, closed it. Madame Malkin stuck a pin in his robe and he yelped, and the conversation ended. John, who had been standing by the window watching the street, didn't turn around, but Harry caught the faintest shift at the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. They bought books at Flourish and Blots, a chaotic, towering bookshop that smelled like old paper and magic and made Harry want to stay for hours, which was the first time all day that his 11-year-old self had won out over his training. He bought everything on the list and then added 6 more books that weren't advanced defense texts, a history of wandless magic traditions, and a slim volume on occlumency that Marlowe slipped into the pile with a significant look. You'll need that, she said quietly. Hogwarts has at least one known Legilimens on staff. Your mental defenses are good, John, and I made sure of that, but formal occlumency training will shore up the gaps. Who's the Legilimens? A man named Severus Snape, potions professor, former Death Eater turned spy for Dumbledore, complicated history, he was obsessed with your mother. Harry filed that away without comment. Potions supplies from the apothecary, a telescope, scales, crystal vials, a cauldron pewter standard size. Each purchase was made efficiently, without browsing or dawdling, and John carried the bags without complaint, which was its own kind of surreal. John Wick, the Baba Yaga, walking through a magical shopping district with armfuls of school supplies like any other parent on a Saturday. The last stop was Ollivander's. The shop was narrow and old and had the particular atmosphere of a place where the air itself was paying attention. Shelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling, packed with narrow boxes, thousands of them, stacked and sorted in an order that was probably logical to someone but looked like chaos to everyone else. The light was dim and golden and dust motes drifted in it like tiny stars. The shop was empty, no one behind the counter, no one visible at all. Harry stepped inside and the door swung shut behind him with a soft click and the silence was total. John's hand moved, not to the weapon under his jacket, but to the ready position, hovering. Instinct. "I wouldn't," said a soft voice from somewhere in the shelves. "There's no danger here, Mr. Wick, only wands." An old man emerged from between the shelves like a ghost materializing from a wall. He was thin and pale, with wide, luminous eyes that caught the light in a way that wasn't entirely human. His hair was white and wild, and his hands were long-fingered and careful, the hands of a craftsman who had been doing this for longer than most people lived. "Ollivander," Marlowe said. "Marlowe. It's been 23 years, 25, has it? Time does get away from one." His eyes moved to Harry and they widened and something in them kindled, a light and excitement, a hunger for knowledge. "Ah, Mr. Potter, I've been wondering when I'd see you. You have your mother's eyes." "So I'm told. I remember every wand I've ever sold, every one. Your mother's was willow, 10¼ inches, swishy, excellent for charm work. Your father's was mahogany, 11 inches, pliable, a powerful wand for transfiguration." He paused. "And the wand that gave you that scar, you, 13½ inches, phoenix feather core. A terrible wand, beautiful but terrible." His eyes moved over Harry with an intensity that was different from the pub, different from the goblins, different from anyone they'd encountered today. Ollivander wasn't looking at a celebrity, he was looking at a puzzle. "You've been trained," he said, "magically outside the traditional system." "Yes, wandless work, raw channeling, old methods." His eyes narrowed. "Runic foundation, partially," Marlowe said from the doorway. "Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. This will be interesting. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter, but you're not what most wizards are. Let's see what chooses you." He disappeared into the shelves and returned with a stack of boxes. The fitting began. The first wand, beechwood and dragon heartstring, produced nothing. Harry held it and felt nothing, and Ollivander took it back immediately. The second, maple and phoenix feather, shot a stream of sparks that scorched the ceiling. Ollivander grabbed it with the delight of a scientist watching an experiment fail in an interesting way. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth wands all produced varying degrees of wrong. Some fizzled, some sparked, one cracked the shop's front window. Through it all, Harry remained calm and patient, and Ollivander's excitement grew with each failure, because the failures were telling him something. "You're too strong for most of these," he muttered, disappearing into the shelves again. "Your magic is wild, not undisciplined, no, but wild the way a river is wild, powerful and channeled, but not tame. Most wands are designed for tame magic, schooled magic. You need something that can match you." He emerged with a single box. He held it differently from the others, carefully, almost reverently. "Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple." He opened the box. The wand inside was simple, pale wood, elegant, unadorned. "I've had this wand for a long time, Mr. Potter. I've always known it was destined for an unusual wizard." Harry picked it up. The effect was instantaneous. Not sparks, nothing so crude. The air in the shop changed, thickened, heated. The dust motes stopped drifting and hung motionless, and then they began to orbit Harry's hand in slow, widening circles, and the wand in his grip glowed, not brightly but deeply, a warm golden light that came from inside the wood as if something had been sleeping in there for decades and had just woken up. Harry felt it. The wand was a key fitting into a lock he hadn't known existed. His magic, the raw, trained, combat-hardened force that he'd spent years learning to channel, met the wand's focus and fused with it, and for one crystalline moment, everything was aligned. His magic had a voice, and it was singing. The glow faded, the dust settled. Harry held the wand and looked at Ollivander, and his expression was calm, but his eyes were bright. "Yeah," he said, "this one." Ollivander was staring at him with an expression that was equal parts wonder and something that might have been fear. "Curious," he whispered, "very curious. You're going to tell me that the phoenix feather in this wand came from the same bird as the feather in Voldemort's wand," Harry said. Ollivander's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "How did you?" Marlowe's notes were thorough. Yes, that's correct. The same phoenix, 2 feathers from the same bird, brother wands." Harry turned the wand over in his hand. It felt right. It felt like it had always been his and he'd just gotten around to picking it up. "The bird," Harry said, "it belongs to Dumbledore, doesn't it?" Fox, yes, Harry nodded. He tucked the wand into the inside pocket of his jacket, not up his sleeve, not in a back pocket, but in the same position where John carried a weapon. Accessible, concealed, part of his body's geometry. How much? He asked. 7 galleons, Harry paid. He turned to leave and then stopped and looked back at Ollivander. Mr. Ollivander, the wand that gave me this scar, you and Phoenix Feather. If I meet that wand again, what happens? The brother wands cannot be forced to fight each other directly. If they connect, if spells from both wands meet, the result is unpredictable. A phenomenon called priori incantatem. Good to know. He walked out. John and Marlowe followed. Ollivander stood alone in his shop among his thousands of wands and looked at the scorch mark on his ceiling and the crack in his window, and he sat down heavily in his chair. Oh my, he said to no one. They ate lunch at a small restaurant in Muggle London, Harry's choice, because the magical world didn't seem to have anything that wasn't a pub. The restaurant was Italian, quiet, half-empty in the mid-afternoon lull. John ordered pasta and water. He ordered pasta and a Coke. Marlowe ordered wine and didn't eat. The turbaned man in the pub, John said without preamble. I want a name. Marlowe set down her wine. I made inquiries while you were in Ollivander's. His name is Quirinus Quirrell. He's the newly appointed Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts. Took the post this year after a sabbatical. Apparently he traveled abroad for a year studying vampires and dark creatures. He came back, different. The turban is new. So is the nervousness. He was watching Harry. Everyone was watching Harry. Not like that. The others wanted to see a celebrity. He wanted to see something else. Harry, who had been eating his pasta with the focused efficiency of someone who treated meals as fuel, looked up. I saw him too. He flinched when I looked at him. Not like he was afraid of me, like something on him was afraid of me, or reacting to me. John and Marlowe exchanged a look. The scar, Marlowe said quietly. The soul fragment. If Quirrell has been in contact with dark magic, or worse, with what remains of Voldemort, the fragment in your scar might resonate. It didn't hurt, Harry said. I've heard that Horcrux connections cause pain. This wasn't pain, it was more like recognition, like 2 radios on the same frequency. Marlowe was quiet for a long time. She turned her wine glass slowly on the table. Harry, if Quirrell is connected to Voldemort, if Voldemort's shade is using him as a host, then you'll be in close proximity to the man who murdered your parents for an entire school year. Good, Harry said. The word landed on the table like a stone. John didn't react. Marlowe's eyes narrowed. Good, she repeated. If Voldemort is using Quirrell, then Voldemort is weak, weaker than he's ever been. He's hiding in a teacher at a school because he doesn't have a body, doesn't have followers, doesn't have power. He's surviving, not living. Harry took a drink of his Coke. My dad taught me something. Your enemy is at his weakest, that's when you watch him. That's when you learn how he thinks, what he wants, what he'll do when he's desperate, because desperate people make mistakes, and mistakes are opportunities. You're 11 years old, Marlowe said, and Marlowe looked at John. John was eating his pasta. He didn't look up, but the corner of his mouth did that thing again, the almost smile. She's worried about you, John said. I know. She's right to be. I know that too. Harry looked at Marlowe. His green eyes were steady and clear and completely without fear. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to learn wand magic and potions and whatever else they teach. I'm going to watch Quirrell and figure out what Voldemort is doing and what he's after. And when the time comes, if the time comes, I'm going to handle it. Handle it, Marlowe repeated flatly. Yes, you're going to school, Harry, not on a mission. Everything's a mission. Dad taught me that too. Marlowe finished her wine. She set the glass down and folded her hands on the table and looked at Harry with an expression that combined exasperation, pride, and a deep, aching worry that she would never have admitted to. You're going to be the death of me, she said. No, Harry said. I'm going to be the death of Voldemort. Nobody laughed. It wasn't a joke. They spent 2 more days in London. Harry practiced with his new wand at a secure location Marlowe had arranged, the basement of a building in Nocturne Alley, warded against detection, where he could cast freely without the Ministry's underage magic sensors picking him up. The wand was a revelation. Harry's wandless magic was strong, rawer, and more powerful than most adult wizards could manage, but the wand refined it the way a lens refines light. What had been a flood became a beam. What had been instinct became precision. In 2 days of intensive practice, Harry learned to cast every first-year spell on the Hogwarts curriculum and 6 that weren't. The wand amplifies, Marlowe said, watching him work, but it doesn't replace what's underneath. Most wizards use a wand the way a cripple uses a crutch. Take it away and they fall. You won't. Your wandless work is your foundation. The wand is a tool. Use it when it helps. Don't rely on it. What if someone disarms me? Then you're still dangerous. More dangerous than 90% of the wizards you'll encounter, and they won't expect it. Wandless magic in children is considered accidental, uncontrollable bursts of emotion. The idea that an 11-year-old could cast deliberately without a wand is simply not in their framework. Use that. Harry nodded. He raised his left hand, empty, no wand, and a ball of blue-white light materialized above his palm, hovering, casting sharp shadows on the basement walls. He held it for 10 seconds, then closed his fist, and it vanished. Anything else I should know about Hogwarts? A great deal. But the most important thing is this: Dumbledore is watching you. He's been watching you since you were born, since before you were born, if the prophecy is as old as I think it is. He expected you to arrive at Hogwarts as a scared, abused child, someone he could guide, shape, mold into the weapon he needs against Voldemort. That's what the placement with the Dursleys was about: a controlled environment, a grateful orphan who'd see Hogwarts as salvation and Dumbledore as savior. Instead, he gets me. Instead, he gets you, and he's going to have to figure out what to do with you, which means he'll test you, subtly. He'll put challenges in your path to see how you respond. He'll offer mentorship and see if you accept it. He'll try to understand what you are and who made you and whether you can still be steered. He can try. Marlowe allowed herself a rare smile. Yes, he can try. Platform 9 3/4 was accessed absurdly by walking through a brick pillar between platforms 9 and 10 at King's Cross Station. Marlowe had explained this with the weary tone of someone who had long since stopped being amused by the magical world's commitment to hiding in plain sight. The morning of September 1st was bright and cool, and King's Cross was its usual chaos of commuters and travelers and pigeons, and the particular British misery of train stations. John and Harry arrived at 10:30, half an hour early, because John believed in controlling the timeline and Harry had inherited the habit. Marlowe wasn't with them. She'd said her goodbye the night before at the hotel with a handshake that lasted a beat longer than strictly necessary and a piece of advice. Write to me through continental channels, not by owl. Owls can be intercepted. If you need me, use the coin. She'd given him a gold coin, not a galleon, but a continental marker modified with a communication charm. If Harry squeezed it and thought of Marlowe, she'd know. Old magic, simple and unbreakable. Harry had pocketed it and nodded. Now he stood at platform 9 3/4 with his father, and the Hogwarts Express was a gleaming scarlet steam engine that looked like it had been built in 1850 and maintained by magic and stubbornness ever since. Families milled on the platform, parents in robes, children in muggle clothes, trunks and owls and cats, and an extraordinary amount of noise. Harry's trunk was at his feet, new, leather, purchased in Diagon Alley, packed with his school supplies, and in a hidden compartment that Marlowe had enchanted into the lining, a set of throwing knives that John had given him for his 9th birthday. Light, balanced carbon steel, not magical. Not detectable by magical means, because John Wick believed in redundancy, and a wizard who could also put a knife through someone's eye at 20 meters was a wizard with options. John stood beside his son and looked at the train. He was wearing a dark suit and his expression was neutral and his hands were in his pockets and he was, for the first time in a very long time, unsure of what to say. Harry seemed to feel it. He looked up at John with a faint smile, that rare, honest smile that was just for family. "I'll be fine, Dad, I know. You taught me everything I need. Marlowe taught you some of it. She taught me magic, you taught me everything else." The train whistled. 5 minutes to departure. Children were boarding, leaning out of windows to wave at parents. A red-haired woman with a crowd of red-haired children was hugging each one in sequence, loudly and without restraint, and Harry watched her with an expression that was hard to read. "Dad, yeah, thank you, for the dumpster, for all of it, for everything." John looked at his son. 11 years. 11 years since a rainy night and a sound in an alley and a decision made in 4 seconds. 11 years of training and teaching and the slow, terrifying, magnificent process of building a person from the raw materials of love and discipline and the absolute, unshakable conviction that this child would never, ever be helpless. He put his hand on the back of Harry's neck, squeezed. "Remember who you are," he said. Harry's eyes were bright and green and certain. "A Wick, that's right." John let go. Harry picked up his trunk and walked toward the train. He didn't look back, not because he didn't want to, but because looking back wasn't something Wicks did. He boarded the last car, found an empty compartment, stowed his trunk, and sat by the window. The train began to move. Platform 9 3/4 slid past, and Harry caught a last glimpse of his father standing on the platform, still, dark-suited, hands in pockets, watching the train pull away with an expression that no one else would have been able to read, but that Harry knew as well as his own heartbeat. Then the platform was gone and London was sliding past the windows and the Hogwarts Express was carrying Harry Potter, Harry Wick, north, toward Scotland, toward a castle full of witches and wizards and old magic and older secrets, toward a world that thought it knew who he was. It didn't, It had no idea. Harry settled into his seat, felt the comfortable weight of the wand in his jacket and the knives in his trunk and the magic humming in his blood, and he allowed himself a small, quiet smile. The compartment door slid open. A red-haired boy, freckled, tall, slightly grubby, stood in the opening with a trunk that was practically falling apart and an expression of desperate hopefulness. "Anyone sitting here, everywhere else is full. Go ahead," Harry said. The boy heaved his trunk inside with more enthusiasm than coordination, collapsed into the opposite seat and grinned. "I'm Ron Weasley." Harry what?" Harry considered, briefly, giving a false name. Old habit. Then he let it go. He was here to be Harry Potter. He was here to step into the role and own it and see what the magical world made of him. "Potter," he said. "Harry Potter." Ron's eyes went wide, his mouth opened. The reaction was coming. Harry could see it building, the same wave of recognition and awe that had hit the leaky cauldron, but Ron surprised him. Instead of babbling or staring or asking to see the scar, the boy went red to the tips of his ears, swallowed hard, and said, "Wicked." Harry looked at him, assessed him in the space of a heartbeat, open face, honest eyes, the total absence of guile, the kind of person who would be terrible at poker and probably wonderful at everything else. "Yeah," Harry said, "I guess it is." The train picked up speed. London fell away behind them and the countryside opened up, green and rolling and ancient, and the two boys sat in their compartment and talked, and it was easy and it was real and it was the beginning of something. Behind them, fading into the distance, John Wick stood alone on a platform that was slowly emptying of wizarding families, and he watched the space where the train had been, and he breathed. Then he turned and walked back through the barrier and out into King's Cross Station, into the noise and the crowd and the ordinary world, and he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Winston, Jonathan, how was the send-off? He's on the train. And how are you?" John walked through the station. He walked through the crowd without touching anyone, a shadow in a suit, and his face was the same still mask it always was, and his voice was the same low monotone, and he said, "I need a job." Ah, that kind of day. "Give me something far away, something that takes a while." Winston was quiet for a moment. "There's a situation in Vienna, 3 targets. The client is paying well and the timeline is flexible. I'll take it. I'll send the details to your hotel, and John, yeah, he'll be fine, he's your son." John hung up. He put the phone in his pocket and walked out of King's Cross into the London morning, and the city swallowed him the way cities do, completely, impersonally, without a trace. And somewhere to the north, on a train hurtling through the English countryside, his son was eating a chocolate frog and laughing at something Ron Weasley had said, and his wand was warm against his chest, and his knives were in his trunk, and his magic was singing quietly in his blood, and he was ready. He was so ready. Chapter 3: Hogwarts has rules. Harry has better ones. The castle emerged from the darkness like something out of a fever dream. Harry had seen impressive buildings before. The Continental had its own severe grandeur. The director's compound in Belarus had the brutal elegance of a military installation that had been in continuous operation for 2 centuries. He'd walked through the marble halls of Gringotts without blinking. But Hogwarts was different. Hogwarts didn't impress you, it swallowed you. It rose from the black water of the lake in a madness of towers and battlements and lit windows, more cliff face than building, and the magic pouring off it was so thick and layered that Harry could feel it pressing against his skin like warm water. He sat in the boat with Ron and 2 other first years, a round-faced boy named Neville who was clutching a toad with the desperation of a man holding a live grenade, and a girl with enormous bushy hair and a look of barely contained intellectual frenzy who had already introduced herself as Hermione Granger and informed them that she'd memorized all their textbooks. All of them, Ron had said, with the tone of a man being told that someone had voluntarily eaten glass. Every word, Hermione had confirmed, and then launched into an account of the 12 uses of dragon's blood that Harry had tuned out because he already knew them. Marlowe's notes were thorough, and because the castle was demanding his attention. He studied it the way John had taught him to study any new environment. Structure first, multiple entry points, high ground everywhere, the kind of vertical complexity that made standard security doctrine useless. The towers provided overlapping sight lines that would make approaching unseen nearly impossible from the ground, but the castle's sheer size meant that interior security would be a nightmare. Too many corridors, too many rooms, too many places where someone could disappear. The magic was something else. It layered over the physical structure like a second skin, wards, enchantments, detection spells, things Harry could sense but couldn't yet identify. Old magic. The kind that had been accumulating for 1,000 years, spell on top of spell on top of spell, until the building itself was more magic than stone. "You're not gawking," Hermione said, studying him from across the boat. "Should I be? Everyone else is." She was right. The other first-years in the boats around them were staring at the castle with open mouths and wide eyes, the universal expression of children seeing something impossible for the first time. Harry looked at Hermione, who was also not gawking, who was instead watching him with the sharp, cataloging intelligence of someone who noticed everything and filed it for later. "You're not gawking either," he pointed out. "I've read about it extensively. Visual confirmation of existing knowledge isn't as surprising as a completely new stimulus. That's one way to handle wonder." She looked at him sideways. "You're odd." "Yeah." The boat slid across the lake in silence after that, and the castle grew larger and larger until it blocked out the sky. The entrance hall was vast and cold, and lit by hundreds of floating candles that cast shifting, restless light over stone walls and a marble staircase wide enough to drive a car up. A tall woman in emerald green robes stood at the top of the staircase with the rigid posture of a career military officer and the expression of someone who had been dealing with 11-year-olds for decades and had long since run out of patience for nonsense. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said. Her voice was crisp and Scottish and left no room for debate. "I am Professor McGonagall. The start of term feast will begin shortly, but before you take your seats, you must be sorted into your houses. There are 4, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Your house will be your family during your time here. Your triumphs earn points, your rule-breaking loses them. The sorting ceremony will begin in a few moments. I suggest you smarten yourselves up." Her eyes swept the group of first-years and landed on Harry. She held his gaze for a fraction of a second longer than the others. Recognition, evaluation, and something else. Marlowe had told him that McGonagall had taught his birth parents, that she had been fond of them, that she had fought against placing baby Harry with the Dursleys. He saw it in her face now, the slight widening of the eyes, the compression of the lips, the micro-expressions of someone seeing a ghost in the face of a child. Harry held her gaze evenly, and something shifted in McGonagall's expression. She'd been expecting James Potter's arrogance or Lily Evans's warmth, and instead she got something she didn't have a reference for, a stillness. A calm that 11-year-olds simply didn't have. She looked away first, not from weakness, from professionalism. She had a job to do. "Follow me." The great hall was enormous. 4 long tables stretched the length of it, packed with students in black robes, and the ceiling above them was sky. Open sky, black and scattered with stars, which Harry knew was an enchantment and which was still extraordinary, because magic that seamless and sustained required power on a scale that most wizards would never touch. At the head of the hall, a raised platform held the staff table. Harry scanned it in a single pass. An enormous man with a wild beard, Hagrid, the gamekeeper, who had driven the boats. A tiny man sitting on a stack of books. A woman who looked like she'd been wrapped in shawls and left in a crystal ball. And there at the center, an old man with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles and blue eyes that sparkled with the particular quality of someone who wanted you to think he was a kindly grandfather and was, in fact, something considerably more dangerous. Albus Dumbledore. Harry looked at him. Dumbledore looked back. Their eyes met across the great hall, and Harry felt it, a soft, probing pressure against the outer edges of his mind. Gentle, subtle. The kind of mental touch that most people would never notice, a light brush of legilimency disguised as eye contact. Harry's mental defenses engaged automatically. Not the hard walls, those would be obvious, and obvious was stupid. Instead, he presented what Marlowe had taught him to present, a surface. Calm, unremarkable thoughts, mild excitement about the castle, nervousness about the sorting. A child's mind, open and simple, and exactly what Dumbledore expected to find. Underneath that surface, behind walls of disciplined thought that Marlowe had spent 6 years building and testing and reinforcing, Harry's real mind observed the intrusion with clinical detachment. He noted its texture, its direction, its intent. Dumbledore was scanning, not reading, looking for broad patterns, emotional states, not trying to extract specific memories. A first pass, a handshake. Harry gave him the handshake. A perfectly constructed surface of childlike wonder over a core of absolute steel. Dumbledore smiled, warm, grandfatherly, entirely unconvincing if you knew what to look for. Harry didn't smile back. He didn't need to sell it that hard. At the far end of the staff table, another pair of eyes was watching him. Black eyes and a sallow face framed by curtains of greasy black hair, and the expression behind them was complicated. Hatred and fascination and something raw and wounded that had nothing to do with Harry and everything to do with someone Harry had never met. Severus Snape. Harry clocked him, filed him, and turned his attention to the sorting ceremony. A stool had been placed at the front of the hall, and on it sat a hat. A battered, patched, ancient pointed hat that looked like it had been forgotten in an attic for several centuries. It was apparently going to sort them. The hat sang a song. Harry listened to the lyrics with the analytical attention he gave to all intelligence briefings and learned the key facts. Gryffindor valued bravery, Slytherin valued ambition, Ravenclaw valued intellect, Hufflepuff valued loyalty. 4 houses, 4 value systems, 4 pre-built identity frameworks that the school used to sort children into categories before they were old enough to decide for themselves who they wanted to be. Harry had opinions about that, but he kept them behind his surface. Students were called alphabetically. Each one sat on the stool, put on the hat, and was sorted, sometimes instantly, sometimes after a pause. Harry watched each sorting with interest, reading the students' body language as they walked up, their expressions when the hat announced its decision, the reactions of the house tables. Granger, Hermione, the bushy-haired girl from the boat, practically ran to the stool. The hat sat on her head for nearly a minute, an unusually long time, and then shouted, "Gryffindor." Hermione's face split into a grin that transformed her from bookish to radiant, and she hurried to the Gryffindor table. Malfoy, Draco, the blonde boy from Madame Malkin's, swagger up to the stool. The hat barely touched his head before screaming, "Slytherin." Malfoy walked to the Slytherin table with the smug satisfaction of someone whose future had been confirmed by a hat, which was a sentence Harry never thought he'd think. "Potter, Harry." The hall went silent, not gradually, instantly. Every head turned, every eye found him. The whisper started like a wave, "Potter, Harry Potter." "The Harry Potter, did she say Potter?" Harry walked to the stool. His pace was unhurried, his back was straight. He didn't look at the whispering students or the staring staff. He sat down and McGonagall placed the hat on his head. Darkness. The hat fell over his eyes and the great hall vanished, and he was alone with a voice. Well, the voice said. It was dry and old and amused, and Harry noted, unsettled. "What do we have here?" Harry waited. He didn't project thoughts. He didn't offer anything. He simply sat behind his defenses and let the hat come to him. "Oh, that's quite good," the hat said. "A clumency in an 11-year-old. I haven't seen that in, actually, I've never seen that. You're going to have to lower those walls, Mr. Potter. I can't sort what I can't see." Harry considered. Then he opened a door, one door carefully chosen, leading to a curated selection of memories and traits that he was willing to share. Enough for the hat to work with, not enough to compromise him. The hat's presence rushed through the opening like water through a crack. "Oh," it said, a pause, longer than any pause it had taken that evening. "Oh my." Another pause. "You've been trained, not by wizards. Well, partially by wizards, but who raised you? This isn't a normal childhood. This is, oh, I see. That's Mr. Potter, you're quite possibly the most terrifying 11-year-old to ever sit on this stool." "So I've been told," Harry murmured. "Where do I go? Where do you go? Let me think. You have courage, not the performative kind, not bravado, the real thing. Cold courage, the kind that doesn't flinch. That's Gryffindor. You have ambition, enormous ambition, though it's not for power or status, it's for mastery, control, readiness. That's Slytherin. You have intellect, trained, honed, strategic. That's Ravenclaw, and loyalty, deep, absolute, unbreakable loyalty to a very small number of people. That's Hufflepuff. Pick one. You do well in any of them. Slytherin would sharpen you, Ravenclaw would refine you." But the hat hesitated. "I'll be honest, Mr. Potter, I'm frightened of you, not of what you are, but of what you'll become. The last time I sat on a head this powerful and this disciplined, the student's name was Tom Riddle, and he became the darkest wizard of the age." Something shifted behind Harry's walls, not anger, something colder and harder and more precise. "I am nothing like Tom Riddle." No, you're not." He was hungry. "You're not hungry, you're prepared. There's a difference, a significant one." The hat was quiet for a moment. "Very well. You belong where your heart is, Mr. Potter, and your heart, underneath all that training, all those walls, all that cold steel, your heart is brave. Not because you don't know fear, but because you've been taught that fear is a tool, not a master. That's the truest form of courage there is." The hat's voice rose, no longer private, booming through the great hall. "Gryffindor." The Gryffindor table exploded. The cheering was deafening, raw, the sound of 300 students losing their minds because the boy who lived was there. Harry removed the hat and set it on the stool and walked to the Gryffindor table through a storm of applause and backslapping that he accepted with the practiced ease of someone who had been in rooms full of adoring strangers before and knew exactly how to navigate them. He sat next to Hermione, who was clapping politely and studying him with those sharp brown eyes. "The hat took a long time with you," she said. "It did. What did it say?" "That I'm terrifying." Hermione laughed. Then she stopped laughing because Harry's expression hadn't changed, and she realized he wasn't joking. "Oh," she said. Ron was sorted into Gryffindor 2 minutes later and dropped into the seat on Harry's other side with the boneless relief of someone who'd been dreading an outcome that hadn't materialized. "Thank God," he breathed. "My whole family's been Gryffindor. Mum would have killed me if I'd gone anywhere else." He looked at Harry. "Mate, the hat took forever with you. I thought it was going to explode." "It considered it." Ron laughed because he thought Harry was being funny. Harry let him think that. The feast appeared on golden plates: roast beef, chicken, pork chops, potatoes in every configuration, vegetables, gravy, bread, pies. The food materialized from nothing, which was impressive magic, and Harry ate with controlled efficiency while Ron ate like a man who had been lost in the desert for a week and had just found an oasis made of meat. At the staff table, Dumbledore watched Harry with those blue eyes and that gentle smile, and Harry felt the warmth of it from across the hall, and he ate his dinner and gave the old man nothing. Beside Dumbledore, Snape stared at Harry with an intensity that bordered on deranged, and Harry filed that away too. The turban was at the far end of the table. Quirrell, sitting between a very small professor and an empty chair, picking at his food with trembling hands. Harry watched him without appearing to watch him, a skill John had drilled into him since childhood, the art of peripheral surveillance. Quirrell was nervous, not sorting ceremony nervous, not new job nervous. Deeply, fundamentally nervous, the kind of nervous that came from something pressing against you from the inside. Harry finished his meal and let the noise and spectacle of the feast wash over him, and underneath the surface, underneath the well-constructed facade of an excited first year experiencing the wonders of Hogwarts for the first time, his mind was mapping the hall, counting exits, cataloging faces, and building a threat assessment that would have impressed a CIA analyst. He was operational. Gryffindor Tower was at the top of the castle, accessed through a portrait of a fat woman in a pink dress who required a password and had opinions about people who forgot it. The common room was warm and round and cluttered with armchairs and tables and the accumulated detritus of centuries of students, and Harry's dorm was a circular room in the tower with 5 four-poster beds draped in crimson and gold. His dormmates were Ron, Neville, and 2 other boys, Seamus Finnegan, who was Irish and loud and had already set something on fire, and Dean Thomas, who was tall and quiet and had a West Ham poster that he hung with reverent care. Harry chose the bed nearest the window. Not because of the view, because of the exit. The window opened onto a ledge that connected to the tower's exterior stonework, and from there, a climber with Harry's training could reach the roof or descend to the grounds in under 2 minutes. He didn't mention this to his dormmates. He unpacked his trunk efficiently, placing his school supplies in the provided dresser and his robes in the wardrobe. The hidden compartment with the knives he left sealed, not because he needed them tonight, but because revealing them on the first night would be premature. He placed his wand under his pillow. An amateur habit, maybe, but he liked the feel of it close while he slept. Ron was already in bed, curtains half-drawn, yawning. "Night, Harry. Night, Ron." The tower was quiet. The other boys settled into sleep with the easy unconsciousness of children who had never had a reason to stay alert at night. Harry lay in the darkness and listened to the castle. It creaked and groaned and whispered, old stone settling, magic shifting, the building breathing like a living thing. There were sounds in the walls that might have been pipes and might have been something else. There were footsteps in corridors that should have been empty. He cataloged them all, built a mental model of the castle's nighttime rhythms, and eventually let himself drift into the light, vigilant sleep that John had taught him, rest that recharged the body while keeping the mind at a low hum, ready to fire. He dreamed of a dumpster and rain and strong hands lifting him into the light, and in the dream he was warm. The first week established patterns. Classes were held in a rotating schedule that seemed designed to maximize confusion and walking time, transfiguration in one tower, potions in the dungeon, charms in a corridor that Harry was fairly certain moved when no one was looking. He attended them all, sat in the front or the back depending on sight lines, and absorbed the material with the focused efficiency of someone who had been educated by professionals. Transfiguration with McGonagall was precise, demanding, and excellent. She taught with the no-nonsense clarity of a woman who respected the material and expected her students to do the same. Harry liked her. She reminded him of the director, different in every particular, but the same fundamental architecture. A woman who had earned her authority and wore it without apology. On the first day, she turned her desk into a pig and back again, and the class gasped, and Harry watched the wand movement and the incantation and the underlying magical mechanics with the trained eye of someone who had been doing wandless transfiguration. Crude, instinctive, nothing like this refined since he was 7. When the class spent the next hour trying to turn matches into needles, Harry did it on his 3rd attempt. McGonagall saw it from across the room. She walked to his desk and looked at the needle, perfect, gleaming, sharp, and then looked at Harry with an expression that mixed surprise with something deeper. "Exceptional, Mr. Potter. 5 points to Gryffindor." "Thank you, Professor. Have you had prior instruction?" Some informal training, yes. From whom? A family friend. McGonagall's lips pressed together. She wanted to push. Harry could see it, the questions crowding behind her eyes, but she was a professional and the classroom was full, and she let it go with a nod. Well done. Charms with Professor Flitwick was delightful. The tiny man was a former dueling champion, a fact that Harry had extracted from Marlowe's notes, and that showed in everything about him, from the precision of his demonstrations to the way he moved, always balanced, always centered. Harry filed him as a potential resource. Herbology was straightforward. History of magic was taught by a ghost who droned in a monotone that put half the class to sleep within minutes. Harry used the time to practice occlumency exercises, which was more productive. Astronomy was at midnight in a tower that had excellent sight lines over the grounds, which Harry noted for future reference. Defense against the dark arts was Quirrell. The classroom smelled like garlic, cloves of it hung from the ceiling, draped over the windows, stuffed in every corner. Quirrell claimed it was to ward off a vampire he'd met in Albania. Harry walked in, sat down, and immediately felt it, the faint, buzzing resonance he'd noticed in the leaky cauldron. Not pain, recognition. The thing in his scar and the thing in this room were aware of each other. Quirrell stuttered. He stammered. He dropped his chalk twice and apologized 4 times in the first 3 minutes, and his teaching style consisted of reading from the textbook in a trembling voice that drained all interest from material that should have been riveting. It was performance. Harry knew performance. He'd been trained to spot it, trained to do it, trained to see through it. Quirrell's nervousness was real on the surface, but underneath it was something else. A second frequency, a whisper under the stutter. When Quirrell turned to write on the board and the class couldn't see his face, the trembling stopped. His hand was steady, his writing was controlled, and once, just once, Harry caught a flicker of something in the man's eyes that wasn't fear, it was calculation. Harry sat through the class and took notes and asked no questions, and when it was over he walked out and found a quiet alcove and wrote a message on a slip of paper that he folded into a continental cipher, a code that only someone trained in the network would recognize. Quirrell is a host, confirmed, something in the back of his head, turban covers it. The scar reacts to proximity. Not pain, signal, he's playing weak. He's not weak, watching him. He gave the paper to a house elf he'd discovered in the kitchens on his second night. Hogwarts house elves were everywhere, invisible, overlooked, and delighted to help a student who spoke to them like people. The elf, whose name was Dobby and who had enormous tennis ball eyes and a passion for socks, agreed to send the message through a channel Harry had established with the London Continental via a mail drop in Hogsmeade. It wasn't as fast as the coin system, but it was more detailed. Potions was in the dungeon, cold, damp, badly lit, and dominated by Severus Snape. Snape entered the classroom the way a shark enters a reef, gliding, silent, and with the clear implication that everything in his vicinity was either prey or an inconvenience. He was tall and thin and dressed entirely in black, and his face had the particular quality of someone who had decided long ago that the world was disappointing and had never found reason to revise the assessment. He called roll. When he reached Harry's name, he paused. Ah yes, Harry Potter, our new celebrity. The Slytherin half of the room sniggered, the Gryffindor half tensed. Harry sat at his desk with his hands folded and his expression neutral and waited. Snape looked at him. Harry looked back. And then Snape did something that Marlowe had warned him about and that Harry had been preparing for since he was 9 years old. He pushed. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't the gentle probe that Dumbledore had used in the Great Hall. It was a lance, sharp, aggressive, aimed at the center of Harry's consciousness with the precision of a surgical strike. Snape's legilimency was combat grade, honed by years of spying, and he drove it at Harry's mind with the clear intention of cracking it open and reading whatever was inside. He hit the wall. Harry's mental defenses didn't bend, didn't flex, didn't crack. Snape's probe struck a barrier that was built from 10 years of training. Marlowe's occlumency drills layered over John's mental discipline, layered over the natural compartmentalization of a child who had grown up in a world where information was currency and secrets were survival. The wall was smooth, featureless, and absolute, and Snape hit it and bounced. The rebound was visible. Snape flinched. A tiny motion, a tightening around the eyes, a fractional recoil, but Harry saw it, and Snape knew Harry saw it, and for a single, charged moment, they looked at each other across the dungeon classroom and understood each other perfectly. You tried, Harry's calm gaze said. You failed. Snape's black eyes narrowed. Something shifted in them. The hatred was still there, but it was joined now by something else. Wariness, the recognition of a predator encountering something it hadn't expected. Tell me, Potter, Snape said, his voice silky. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormhood? The draft of living death, Harry said. A sleeping potion so powerful that its use on another person without consent is classified as assault under wizarding law. Snape's expression didn't change. And where would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? The stomach of a goat. It's a stone that counteracts most poison. Also available commercially from any well-stocked apothecary, which seems more practical than rummaging through goat stomachs. A ripple went through the classroom. Ron made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh. Hermione, who had her hand raised and her mouth open, slowly closed her mouth and lowered her hand and stared at Harry with something approaching reverence. And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? There is no difference. They're the same plant, also known as aconite. Silence. Snape stared at Harry. Harry stared at Snape. The dungeon was very quiet. It seems our celebrity has done his homework, Snape said. The words were acid, but the tone was off, slightly wrong, slightly shaken, as if the script he'd prepared wasn't working and he hadn't written an alternative. Let's see if book learning translates to practical skill. The class proceeded. Snape was sharp and demanding and blatantly biased toward Slytherin, and Harry navigated it the way he navigated all hostile environments, with calm competence and an absolute refusal to be rattled. His potion was perfect. Snape looked at it, found nothing to criticize, and moved on without comment, which was, Ron told him later, basically a standing ovation from Snape. In the corridor after class, Hermione fell into step beside him. How did you know all that? The textbook doesn't cover the draft of Living Death until third year. I read ahead. I read every textbook cover to cover. The draft of Living Death isn't in any of them. I read more than the textbooks. Hermione studied him. She had a way of looking at people that reminded Harry of Marlowe, direct, analytical, utterly unintimidated by what she found. You blocked him, she said quietly. Harry looked at her. Blocked who? Snape. When he looked at you at the beginning of class, he was doing something, some kind of mental magic. I could feel it from 3 rows back. The air changed, and you blocked it. Harry said nothing for a moment. They walked. The corridor was busy with students moving between classes, and the noise covered their conversation. You're perceptive, he said. That's not an answer. Number, it's not. He looked at her. Can I trust you, Hermione? The question caught her off guard. She blinked. Yes, I think so. I mean, we've only known each other a week, so the empirical basis for trust is limited, but Snape is a Legilimens. He can read minds through eye contact. He tried to read mine, and I didn't let him. I've been trained in occlumency, mental defense. If you want, I can teach you the basics. It's something everyone in this school should know, and no one teaches it. Hermione's eyes went wide, then they went sharp, then they went angry. A teacher tried to read your mind without permission. That has to be illegal. Probably, but I'm not interested in filing complaints. I'm interested in being prepared. You'd teach me, really, if you want to learn and if you keep it between us. Hermione was quiet for several steps. Harry could see the wheels turning, the ethical calculation, the practical assessment, the sheer hunger for knowledge battling with the rule follower's instinct that said teachers should be trusted. Yes, she said. I want to learn. Good, we'll start this weekend. Malfoy happened on Wednesday. Harry was in the corridor between Transfiguration and lunch, walking with Ron, when the blonde boy from Madame Malkin stepped into their path with 2 large boys flanking him like poorly dressed bookends. Crabbe and Goyle, Ron had told him. Malfoy's muscle, thick in all the ways that mattered and none of the ways that helped. Potter, Malfoy said. He had the drawling confidence of someone who had never been challenged and expected the universe to continue accommodating him. I hear you're getting quite the reputation, showing off in class, answering questions no one asked you. Some people might say you're trying too hard. Some people might, Harry agreed pleasantly. My father says you were raised by muggles. That Dumbledore placed you with some common family and they turned you into their performing monkey. The great Harry Potter doing tricks for attention. Ron's face went red, his fists clenched. Harry put a hand on Ron's arm, light, brief, a gesture that said, I've got this, and Ron, to his credit, recognized it and held. Your father's information is out of date, Harry said, but I'm sure he does his best. Malfoy's eyes narrowed. My father is Lucius Malfoy. He's on the board of governors of this school. He has connections you couldn't. I know who your father is, Draco. Harry's voice didn't change, same easy, conversational tone, but something in it shifted. A temperature drop. I know what your father is too, former Death Eater, claimed the imperious defense at trial, currently buying influence at the ministry to keep his name clean. He's a politician pretending to be an aristocrat, and he's been living on borrowed time since Voldemort fell. The corridor went dead silent. Not just Malfoy, everyone within earshot froze. Students pressed against the walls. 2 Hufflepuff second years who had been walking past stopped mid-step. Even the portraits on the wall went still. It was the name. Voldemort, you didn't say the name. Everyone in the magical world knew that. You said you know who, or he who must not be named, because the fear was so deep and so ingrained that even a decade after the man's fall, his name carried power. Harry said it like it was nothing, because it was nothing, a name, letters strung together. The man behind the name had murdered his parents, and Harry intended to deal with that in due course, but the name itself, the name was just air. Malfoy had gone white. Not the white of anger, the white of someone who had just stepped on what they thought was solid ground and felt it give way beneath them. You said, his name, yes, do you want me to say it again? Malfoy didn't. That was written in every line of his body. He stood in the corridor with his two bookends and his expensive robes and his father's name and his generations of pureblood privilege, and he looked at Harry Potter, and for the first time in his short, pampered life, he encountered someone who was not playing the game he'd been raised to play. Harry stepped forward, one step, casual, unhurried. He was shorter than Malfoy, shorter than most of the boys in his year, but the step brought him inside Malfoy's space, and Malfoy didn't back up only because his body hadn't caught up with what his brain was screaming. Draco, Harry said quietly, just between them, I don't have a problem with you. I don't know you, you might be all right under all that posturing, I haven't decided yet, but understand something right now, I'm not someone you push. Not because I'll run to a teacher, not because I'll cry about it. Because the places I come from, pushing someone has consequences, and I've been living with consequences my whole life. Malfoy's mouth was open. His eyes were wide. Crabbe and Goyle, who operated on a delay, sensed that something had changed but couldn't determine what. Harry held Malfoy's gaze for another 2 seconds. Then he stepped back, and the temperature in the corridor returned to normal, and he was just a short, messy-haired kid in school robes again. See you in class, Draco. He walked past. Ron followed, slightly dazed. Malfoy stood in the corridor and didn't move for a long time. When Harry and Ron were out of earshot, Ron exhaled explosively. Mate, what the bloody hell was that? A conversation. That was not a conversation. That was, I don't even know what that was. You said you know whose name, to Malfoy's face, in front of everyone. It's a name, Ron. Fearing a name is giving it power it doesn't deserve. Easy for you to say. You're the one who beat him. Harry looked at Ron. I was a baby. I didn't beat anyone. My mother beat him. She died for me, and whatever she did, whatever magic that was, it's what stopped him, not me. Ron was quiet for a moment, processing this with the earnest, open-faced thoughtfulness that Harry was coming to appreciate. Ron wasn't brilliant in the way Hermione was, but he was smart in ways that mattered, emotionally perceptive, loyal to his bones, and willing to sit with uncomfortable truths instead of running from them. Still, Ron said, that was wicked. Harry smiled. Thanks, Ron. Malfoy's going to write to his father, you know. Good, let him. The troll came on Halloween. It was ironic, Harry thought later. Halloween, the anniversary of his parents' murder. The night Voldemort had come to Godric's Hollow and killed James and Lily and tried to kill him. 10 years to the day, and here he was at a feast in the Great Hall, surrounded by floating jack-o'-lanterns and enchanted bats and students stuffing themselves with candy, and the world was doing what it always did, spinning forward, indifferent to anniversaries, carrying the living over the graves of the dead. He wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He didn't do self-pity, John hadn't tolerated it, and Harry hadn't developed the habit. But he was quiet during the feast, quieter than usual, and Hermione, sitting across from him, noticed and didn't comment, which was one of the reasons he'd started liking her. Hermione herself was not at the feast. She was in the girls' bathroom on the first floor, crying, because Ron had said something about her in Charm's class, something careless and cruel in the way that 12-year-old boys are sometimes careless and cruel, and she'd heard it and fled. Harry knew this because Parvati Patil had mentioned it at the feast. Ron knew it too, and his face was a study in guilt and stubbornness, guilty because he knew he'd been wrong, stubborn because admitting it was hard. Then Quirrell burst into the Great Hall. The doors slammed open and the professor sprinted up the aisle between the tables, turban askew, face white, eyes rolling with a terror that was, Harry assessed instantly, genuine. Whatever was happening, Quirrell wasn't performing. Troll, he screamed. Troll in the dungeons, thought you ought to know. He fainted, or appeared to faint. Harry's eyes stayed on him as he hit the floor, and he caught it, a flicker, a fraction of a second, where Quirrell's eyes, rolling back in his head, tracked sideways toward the staff table, toward Dumbledore, checking, evaluating. Even in the moment of apparent collapse, the thing behind Quirrell's act was watching. The hall erupted into chaos. Students screaming, standing, running. Dumbledore's voice cut through it, amplified, commanding. Silence, prefects, lead your houses back to the dormitories. Teachers, follow me to the dungeons. Harry was already moving, not toward the dormitory, toward the first-floor bathroom. Ron saw him go and followed without hesitation, not because he understood what Harry was doing, but because Harry was going somewhere with purpose and Ron's instincts said to follow. Where are you, Hermione? Harry said. First floor bathroom. The troll's supposed to be in the dungeons, but Quirrell let it in. This is a diversion, and Hermione doesn't know. Quirrell let it in. How do you, Ron, move? They moved. Through corridors that were emptying as students fled to their dormitories, past classrooms and alcoves and suits of armor, and Harry navigated the castle with a sureness that shouldn't have been possible after 6 weeks but was, because he'd been mapping the building since the first night. They smelled the troll before they saw it. It was a stench like a blocked sewer mixed with unwashed feet and something organic and wrong, and it was coming from the first-floor corridor, and Harry rounded the corner, and there it was. 12 feet tall, gray skin like wet concrete. Small, stupid head on a thick neck, and a body that was all muscle and mass, and the particular danger of something that was too dumb to be afraid of anything. It was carrying a wooden club the size of a tree trunk, and it was lumbering down the corridor toward the girls' bathroom with the single-minded purpose of something that had been pointed in a direction and told to go. Harry stopped. Ron stopped beside him, and the color drained from his face. Bloody hell, Ron whispered. Stay here, Harry said. What? No, Harry, that thing's... Ron, stay here. If it gets past me, run. He didn't wait for a response. He walked toward the troll. The troll saw him. It stopped. Its tiny eyes squinted, processing the small figure approaching it, and whatever passed for thought in its brain produced a conclusion. Small thing hit small thing. It swung the club. Harry was already not there. He'd read the swing before it started, the shift of weight, the rotation of the shoulder, the telegraph that every untrained fighter broadcasted and that John had taught him to see since he was 4 years old. He moved laterally, fast, and the club smashed into the stone floor where he'd been standing, sending a shockwave of shattered flagstone in every direction. The troll grunted and swung again, backhand this time, and Harry ducked it by 3 inches and kept moving, circling, staying on the outside of the troll's swing arc. He was in no danger. The troll was strong, enormously strong, but it was slow, stupid, and predictable. It fought the way all untrained brutes fought, big movements, no defense, no awareness of what its opponent was doing between swings. Harry had been sparring with trained killers since he was 8. This was nothing. But he needed to end it fast, because Hermione was in that bathroom and the troll had been heading there, and he didn't know if more were coming. He drew his wand. Not because he needed it, he could have done this wandlessly, but because the wand gave him precision, and precision was what this required. The troll swung the club overhead, a massive downward strike aimed at crushing Harry into the floor. Harry sidestepped, 1 step, minimal movement, maximum efficiency, and pointed his wand at the troll's right knee. Reducto. The spell hit the knee joint. The effect was immediate and catastrophic, a focused blast of destructive force that shattered the kneecap and tore through the joint like a bullet through wet paper. The troll screamed, a sound so loud it shook dust from the ceiling, and its leg buckled, and 12 feet and 1 ton of mountain troll crashed to the floor with an impact that Harry felt through the soles of his shoes. The club bounced free. The troll thrashed, trying to rise, its small brain not comprehending what had happened. Harry walked toward it, calm, deliberate, the way John walked. He pointed his wand at the troll's head. Stupefy, he put everything into it. Not the textbook amount, the full, raw, wandless strained force of his magic channeled through the holly wand and focused into a single point. Stunning spell hit the troll between the eyes like a red sledgehammer, and the thrashing stopped, and the troll went limp, and the corridor was suddenly, enormously quiet. Harry stood over the unconscious troll and breathed. His heart rate was elevated but controlled. Combat cardio, John called it, the art of keeping your body's stress response useful instead of overwhelming. He checked the troll, unconscious, not dead, breathing in great, shuddering snores that smelled like a landfill. He turned to the bathroom. The door was closed. He knocked. Hermione, it's Harry. The troll's down. You can come out. A long pause. Then the door opened and Hermione stood there, face tear-streaked and chalk-white, eyes enormous. She looked at Harry. She looked at the troll on the floor behind him. She looked at Harry again. You blew out its knee and stunned it. Are you hurt? Number, I know. I heard it coming and I hid in a stall. What do you mean you blew out its knee? Reducto to the joint. Textbook wouldn't recommend it, but it's effective on large targets with minimal armor. Hermione stared at him. Her mouth opened and closed several times. Ron arrived at a run, wand out, face the color of old paper. He took in the scene, Harry standing calmly, Hermione in the bathroom doorway, the troll unconscious on the floor in a spreading pool of something Harry didn't want to identify, and his wand arm dropped. You already did it, Ron said. Yeah, by yourself. It wasn't that hard, it's just a troll. Just a Harry, that thing's 12 feet tall. 12 feet tall and dumber than a bag of rocks. Big doesn't mean dangerous, Ron. Dangerous means dangerous. Footsteps. Fast, multiple, coming from both ends of the corridor. The teachers arrived in a wave, McGonagall first, pale and furious, followed by Snape, who was limping and trying to hide it, followed by Quirrell, who took one look at the troll and sat down on the floor and put his head between his knees. McGonagall looked at the troll. She looked at Harry. She looked at his wand, which was still in his hand, held in a grip that was not the standard student grip taught in Charms class, but the combat grip of someone who had been trained to treat a wand as a weapon. "Mr. Potter," she said, her voice was very controlled. "Explain. Hermione was in the bathroom and didn't know about the troll. I came to get her. The troll was between me and the bathroom, so I dealt with it." "You dealt with it?" "Yes, Professor. A fully grown mountain troll. Its knee is broken and it's unconscious. It'll need medical attention when it wakes up." McGonagall looked at the troll again, at the shattered knee, at the scorch mark between its eyes where the stunner had hit. She turned back to Harry. "That was a reductor curse. That is a fourth-year spell, Mr. Potter." "Yes." "And the stunning spell you used, I can see the impact mark, was significantly more powerful than what any first year should be capable of producing." I was motivated. Snape, standing behind McGonagall, was staring at Harry with that black intensity, and Harry met his gaze and held it, and this time Snape didn't try legilimency. He just looked, and what he saw seemed to confirm something he'd been suspecting, because his expression shifted, a fraction barely visible, into something that was almost, reluctantly, respect. Quirrell on the floor had his head down. But Harry caught his eyes moving, darting, quick, toward the fallen troll and then away, and the flicker in them wasn't fear. It was frustration. The troll had been a distraction, and it had been neutralized before it served its purpose. Harry filed that away, critical intelligence. Quirrell had sent the troll as a distraction for what? 5 points to Gryffindor, McGonagall said tightly. For sheer dumb luck and frankly terrifying competence. "Now get back to your dormitory, all three of you now." They went. In the corridor, walking fast, Ron said, "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life." Hermione said nothing. She was walking beside Harry, and her face was strange, not scared, not grateful, but thoughtful, processing. Fitting this new data into her model of who Harry Potter was, and finding that the model needed to be significantly revised. "Harry," she said, as they reached the portrait of the fat lady. "Yeah, thank you. For coming for me, you're welcome. That spell, the reductor curse, that's not in any first-year textbook." "Number, where did you learn it?" Harry considered his answer. Hermione was sharp, loyal, and trustworthy. He'd already begun to trust her with occlumency training, which meant he'd already decided she was inside his circle. "I learned it from the same person who taught me to fight," he said. "I wasn't raised the way people think I was, Hermione. I wasn't raised by muggles who didn't understand magic. I was raised by someone who understood that the world is dangerous and who made sure I could survive in it." Hermione looked at him for a long time. "Who raised you, Harry?" "My father, but your parents, my birth parents, died when I was a baby. My father, the man who raised me, found me. He took me in, he trained me. Trained you to fight trolls, trained me to fight everything." Hermione absorbed this. Ron, listening from 3 steps behind, was absorbing it too, and his expression was the complex mixture of awe and loyalty and something protective that would, over the years, become the defining feature of Ron Weasley's relationship with Harry Potter. "Okay," Hermione said, "okay, I have about 100 questions. I'll answer some of them, not all. That's fair." She straightened her shoulders, pushed her hair back. "I also want to learn that reductor curse." "Done. And the combat casting grip you use, it's not standard. It allows for faster lateral aiming. I want to learn that too." Harry looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, his smile was real and warm and reached his eyes. "Hermione Granger, you're going to be something. I already am something. I'm going to be something more." They climbed through the portrait hole and into the warmth of Gryffindor Tower, and the common room was buzzing with the news of the troll, and people were already telling the story, embellishing it, inflating it, turning Harry's clinical 8-second takedown into an epic battle, and Harry ignored all of it and sat in an armchair by the fire and closed his eyes. Halloween, the anniversary, 10 years since Voldemort had come to Godric's Hollow. And tonight in this castle, Voldemort's shade had sent a troll as a diversion and was, right now, doing something that Harry hadn't been able to prevent because he'd been busy saving a girl in a bathroom. He wasn't upset about the choice. He'd made it instantly, and he'd make it again. Hermione was alive and unhurt, and that mattered more than whatever Quirrell had been trying to access, but it meant he was behind. Voldemort had made a move, and Harry had been reactive instead of proactive, and that was unacceptable. He opened his eyes, he looked at the fire. Tomorrow he'd start mapping the 3rd floor, the forbidden corridor. Whatever was being hidden there, whatever Quirrell wanted, Harry was going to find it first. He pulled a piece of parchment from his pocket and a quill from the table beside him. In small, precise handwriting, he composed a message. "Dad, school's fine, had to put down a troll, food's decent." There's a situation developing that I'm handling. Will update when I know more. Miss you. He folded it into the Continental cipher and pocketed it for the morning drop. Ron collapsed into the armchair next to him. Mate, seriously, what a night. Yeah, you think there'll be more trolls. The troll wasn't the problem. The troll was the distraction. Ron frowned. Distraction from what? Harry looked at him. Ron Weasley, open face, good heart, the kind of friend who followed you toward a troll without knowing why. He deserved honesty. Not all of it, not yet, but some. Something's hidden in this castle, Ron. Something Dumbledore's protecting, and someone wants it. Ron's frown deepened. Who? I'll tell you when I'm sure. For now, keep your eyes open. Watch Quirrell. The stuttering defense teacher. What about him? Just watch him. Watch where he goes, what he does, who he talks to. Don't be obvious. Ron looked at Harry for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and something settled in his expression, a seriousness that hadn't been there before, a recognition that whatever Harry was asking him to do was real and important and not a game. Okay, Ron said, I'm in. Thanks, Ron. What are friends for, right? Yeah, Harry said. And he meant it in the way that a boy who had grown up in the Continental, surrounded by assassins and killers and people who understood loyalty as a survival mechanism, meant it when he recognized the real thing. Ron Weasley was the real thing. The fire crackled, the common room buzzed. Outside the tower windows, the Scottish night was dark and cold and full of stars, and somewhere in the castle, a man with a turban and a parasite in his skull was planning his next move. Harry was planning his. Chapter 4. The third-floor corridor. Harry began mapping the castle the morning after the troll. Not the way students learn a school, gradually through repetition, building a mental picture of the routes between classes and the location of the bathrooms and the fastest way to the Great Hall. Harry mapped it the way John had taught him to map any operational environment, systematically, thoroughly, with attention to blind spots, choke points, hidden passages, and the things that the people who built the space didn't want you to find. He started before dawn. The castle was silent at 5 in the morning, the kind of deep, breathing silence that old buildings produce when the people inside them are sleeping. Harry slipped out of bed without waking his dormmates, pulled on dark clothes and soft-soled shoes, and left Gryffindor Tower through the portrait hole. The fat lady grumbled but didn't stop him. Portraits, he'd learned, operated on social pressure rather than actual authority. They could refuse to open, but they rarely did if you were polite and didn't make them feel disrespected. The castle at night was different from the castle by day. During the day, it was a school, noisy, bright, full of children and teachers and the mundane business of education. At night, it was something older. The corridors stretched and darkened, and the magic in the walls breathed differently, slower and deeper, and the building felt less like a school and more like what it really was. A 1,000-year-old fortress built by 4 of the most powerful witches and wizards in history, layered with enchantments so deep and so numerous that the stone itself was more spell than mineral. Harry moved through it like smoke. His footsteps were silent, a combination of the soft shoes and the movement training the director had drilled into him, a technique that distributed weight so evenly that even creaking floorboards stayed quiet. He kept to the shadows not because he was afraid of being caught, but because operating unseen was habit, and habits kept you alive. He covered the first floor in 20 minutes, then the second, then the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, each one committed to a mental map that he would later transfer to paper using the cipher notation Marlowe had taught him. He noted every corridor, every classroom, every alcove and niche and broom closet. He noted the staircases that moved, a ridiculous security risk, he thought, but useful if you understood the pattern, and there was a pattern, a rotation that repeated on a 7-day cycle. He noted the hidden passages, and there were dozens, concealed behind tapestries and inside statues and underneath loose flagstones, some leading to other parts of the castle, and some leading out of it entirely. He found the one behind the one-eyed witch on the 4th floor that led to a cellar in Hogsmeade. He found the one behind the mirror on the 5th floor that was caved in halfway through. He found 3 that weren't on any map he'd seen, narrow, cobwebbed, clearly unused for decades, connecting remote parts of the castle in ways that the current administration probably didn't know about. He committed them all to memory: escape routes, flanking paths, tactical options. The 3rd floor east side, the forbidden corridor Dumbledore had mentioned at the start of term, he saved for last. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was the objective, and you always approach the objective with full situational awareness of the surrounding terrain. The corridor was locked, a heavy wooden door with an iron latch and a magical seal that Harry could feel humming against his fingertips when he touched it. Basic locking charm, Alohomora would open it. He'd known that since reading the spell list in his first week. The question wasn't whether he could open it, but whether he should, and the answer depended on what kind of detection spells were layered over the lock. He stood in front of the door and extended his senses. Not his physical senses, his magical ones. The ability Marlowe had trained, the deep perception that let him feel the shape and texture of magical enchantments the way a blind person feels the shape of a face. He pressed his awareness against the door and felt the lock, felt the seal, and nothing else. No alarm charms, no detection hexes, no notification spells that would ping a professor's wand if the door was breached. Just a lock. A single, simple lock on a door in a school full of curious children who were explicitly told not to open it. Dumbledore wanted someone to open this door. Harry filed that away, critical insight, confirmation of Marlowe's warning. Dumbledore was testing, setting traps that looked like forbidden zones, then leaving the door essentially unlocked and waiting to see who came through. Harry opened it. The corridor beyond was dark and cold and smelled like dog, not metaphorically, literally. The thick, musky, overwhelming stench of large canine, and Harry's nose told him the animal was big, unwashed, and present. He moved forward. 3 steps into the corridor, the darkness ahead shifted, and a sound rolled through the space, a low, rumbling growl that came from 3 directions simultaneously. Harry stopped, his eyes adjusted, and he saw it. The dog filled the corridor. Not a normal dog, a monstrous thing, 3-headed, each head the size of a small car, with 6 eyes that glowed amber in the darkness and 3 mouths full of teeth that could bite a man in half. It was standing over a trapdoor set into the floor, and its 6 eyes were fixed on Harry with the unwavering focus of a guard animal that took its job seriously. A Cerberus. Harry had read about them in Marlowe's notes. Greek origin, incredibly dangerous, resistant to most magic. But they had a weakness: music. All Cerberus variants were susceptible to soporific sounds. A design flaw in the species, Marlowe had called it. Harry didn't need to put it to sleep. He needed to see the trapdoor, and he could already see it, a wooden hatch set into the stone floor directly between the dog's massive front paws. Something was hidden beneath it, something that Quirrell wanted, something that Dumbledore was protecting with a guard dog and an unlocked door and whatever other challenges lay below. The dog growled louder, all 3 heads lowered, jaws widening. Harry stood his ground, not out of bravado, but out of assessment. The dog was chained. He could see the massive links anchored to the wall, giving the animal enough range to cover the trapdoor, but not enough to reach the door he'd come through. He'd seen enough. He stepped back, closed the door, relocked it, and returned to Gryffindor Tower before the castle started waking up. He sat on his bed with his curtains drawn and his wand casting a soft light, and he pulled out a blank sheet of parchment and began to draw. Not just the 3rd-floor corridor, the entire picture. Everything he'd observed since September, laid out in the analytical framework John had taught him, a threat assessment matrix crossed with a tactical planning document. At the center he wrote, objective, identify what's hidden beneath the trapdoor. Identify Quirrell's plan to steal it. Intercept. Around it he mapped what he knew. Quirrell, host for Voldemort's shade. Behavior consistent with possession or parasitic attachment. Turban conceals something. Nervous performance masks competent operator. Sent troll as diversion on Halloween, purpose unclear, but likely attempted to access 3rd-floor corridor during chaos. Failed or was interrupted. Snape was limping after Halloween, went to 3rd floor, confronted the dog. Snape, aware of threat, watching Quirrell. Limping suggests he went to the corridor and was injured by the Cerberus. Possible that Snape is protecting whatever's hidden. Antagonistic toward me but not aligned with Quirrell. Potential reluctant ally, or at minimum, a parallel operator working the same problem. Dumbledore knows about the threat, set up the protections, left the door essentially unlocked, wants someone to attempt the obstacle course below the trapdoor, wants to see who it is and how they handle it, playing a long game, using the hidden object as bait, object unknown, something Voldemort wants badly enough to possess a man and infiltrate a school. Something Dumbledore moved from somewhere else to Hogwarts, moved it here, to a school full of children, which means he either trusts his protections completely or he's using the school as a strategic asset, banking on the assumption that Voldemort won't attack a building full of children openly. Harry stared at his notes. The picture was incomplete, but the shape was clear. Dumbledore had something Voldemort wanted. Dumbledore had hidden it in the school. Quirrell was Voldemort's agent. The obstacle course was a test, maybe for Quirrell, maybe for Harry, maybe for both. He needed to know what the object was, and he needed to know what was below the trapdoor before Quirrell got there. He folded the parchment, sealed it with a charm Marlowe had taught him, keyed to his magical signature, unreadable by anyone else, and slid it under his mattress. Then he got dressed and went to breakfast, because even operatives need to eat. The answer came from an unlikely source. Hagrid, the enormous bearded gamekeeper who had driven the boats on the first night, liked Harry. This was not unusual. Hagrid liked most people, and most people liked Hagrid because he radiated a warmth and openness that was impossible to fake and difficult to resist. He'd known Harry's parents, and he talked about them with the uncomplicated fondness of someone who kept his memories simple and his grief close and his heart wide open. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had taken to visiting Hagrid's hut on Friday afternoons, a small, cluttered cabin at the edge of the forbidden forest that smelled like dog and wood smoke, and the particular variety of baked goods that were technically edible but practically hazardous. Hagrid served rock cakes and tea in conversation, and Harry listened to his stories about James and Lily with the quiet attention of someone building a profile. Not a profile of his parents, he had Marlowe's notes for that. A profile of Hagrid himself, because Hagrid knew things. He was the gamekeeper, the keeper of keys, the man who walked the grounds and the forest and the boundary between the school and everything beyond it. He had access, and more importantly, he had the particular vulnerability of a man who was generous and trusting and terrible at keeping secrets. Harry didn't exploit this. Exploitation was a tool he had but didn't enjoy using, especially on people who were kind to him. Instead, he simply paid attention, and Hagrid, over the course of several visits, told him everything he needed to know without ever realizing he'd done it. The object was the Philosopher's Stone. Hagrid mentioned it on the third Friday in passing, while telling a story about picking something up from a vault at Gringotts before Harry's visit. "Shouldn't have told you that," he'd said, and then immediately told them more because Hagrid's relationship with secrecy was like a sieve's relationship with water. The Philosopher's Stone, created by Nicholas Flamel, capable of producing the elixir of life which granted immortality and transmuting base metals into gold, the only one in existence. Dumbledore had moved it from Gringotts to Hogwarts for safekeeping because someone, Hagrid wouldn't say who, but the answer was obvious, had tried to steal it. Voldemort wanted immortality. Of course he did. He'd already split his soul into fragments to avoid death. The Philosopher's Stone was a different path to the same destination, a way to rebuild a body, sustain it, make it permanent. If Quirrell could get the stone to Voldemort's shade, Voldemort could return, fully, physically. Harry sat in Hagrid's hut and drank tea that tasted like boiled sadness and processed this information with the cold clarity that training provided. "Hagrid," he said, "the protection's on the stone." "How many layers?" "Now, Harry, I shouldn't." "Oh, all right, several. Each teacher contributed something. Dumbledore himself did the last one. It's perfectly safe, I'm tellin' ya." "The dog is yours, isn't it?" Hagrid's face did something complicated. Pride warred with the knowledge that he'd just confirmed something he wasn't supposed to confirm. "Fluffy, yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek feller in the pub a few years back. Lovely creature. Juice needs to know how ter handle him. Play him a bit of music and he'll go right off ter sleep." The table went quiet. Ron's teacup stopped halfway to his mouth. Hermione closed her eyes with the expression of someone watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. Hagrid's face fell. "I shouldn't have told ye that." "No," Hermione said gently. "You probably shouldn't have." Harry didn't press further. He had what he needed. The Cerberus could be bypassed with music. The stone was protected by a series of challenges created by the staff, and Quirrell, a Hogwarts professor, would know about at least some of those challenges, either because he'd contributed one himself or because he'd had months to observe and deduce. After the visit, walking back to the castle in the November dusk, Hermione spoke first. "He's going to try for it, Quirrell. Whatever he is, whatever's driving him, he's going to try to get past the protections and take the stone. Yes, and Dumbledore knows this. Dumbledore set it up this way. The stone is bait. Bait for Quirrell, maybe. Or bait for me." Harry walked with his hands in his robe pockets and his eyes on the castle above them. "Marlowe warned me that Dumbledore would test me, put challenges in my path. What better test than this? A dark wizard's agent, a legendary artifact, and a series of puzzles between them. Dumbledore wants to see what I do." "Then don't do anything," Ron said. "If it's a test, don't take it. Let Dumbledore handle Quirrell himself." "I would, except Dumbledore's not going to handle it." "What do you mean?" "I mean the door to the third floor is locked with a first-year charm. I mean the protections are challenges, not walls. They're designed to be gotten through, not to stop someone permanently. I mean Dumbledore has the most powerful wizard in the world's reputation, and he's protecting the one thing Voldemort wants most with a dog, some puzzles, and an unlocked door. Either Dumbledore is stupid, which he's not, or he wants someone to get through." "Someone," Hermione said slowly. "Meaning you." "I think so. That's insane. You're 11. Dumbledore doesn't see an 11-year-old. He sees the boy who lived, the child of prophecy, the weapon he's been cultivating since before I was born. He expected me to arrive at this school helpless and grateful, and when I didn't, he adjusted. This is his adjustment, a crucible, a test to see what I'm made of. They walked in silence for a while. The wind was cold off the lake and the castle's lights were coming on in the windows, warm yellow against the darkening sky. "Are you going to take the test?" Ron asked. Harry looked at him. "I'm going to take the stone before Quirrell gets it, not because Dumbledore wants me to. Because Voldemort is on the other side of that trapdoor, and I don't leave enemies at my back." The weeks that followed were preparation. Harry continued attending classes. He continued training Hermione in occlumency. She was a ferociously fast learner, her organized mind taking to mental defense the way a filing cabinet takes to organization. He continued watching Quirrell, noting patterns, building a picture of the man's movements and habits and the moments when the mask slipped. He also continued his own training. Every morning before dawn, he used an empty classroom on the 7th floor that he'd warded against detection, basic privacy charms that Marlowe had taught him, enough to keep casual observers and patrolling teachers from noticing. He practiced combat casting, the fast, fluid integration of movement and spell work that conventional magical education didn't teach, because conventional magical education treated dueling as a sport rather than a survival skill. He practiced wandless magic, maintaining the foundation that Marlowe had built. And he practiced with his knives, the carbon steel set from John, retrieved from the hidden compartment in his trunk, thrown and retrieved and thrown again, until the muscle memory was as natural as breathing. Hermione found him one morning. She'd figured out his schedule because of course she had, and appeared in the doorway of the empty classroom at 5:15 on a Tuesday with her hair in a messy bun and her expression torn between disapproval and fascination. She watched him throw a knife into a target he'd conjured against the far wall. It hit dead center. He summoned it back to his hand with a flick of wandless magic and threw it again. Same spot. "Those aren't magical," she said. "Number, you brought muggle weapons to school." "I brought tools to school. Harry, if anyone found those, no one will find them. The trunk has a hidden compartment keyed to my magical signature. Even Dumbledore would have to work to crack it." Hermione came in and closed the door behind her. She sat on a desk and watched him throw for a while, her expression moving through several stages of processing. "Teach me," she said. Harry caught the knife mid-recall and looked at her. The knives, not yet, the casting, the way you move when you fight, that thing you do where your wand and your body work together like they're one system. Combat integration, it takes years to learn properly." "Then we'd better start now." Harry studied her. Hermione Granger, age 11, Muggle-born, the most brilliant witch in their year and possibly in the school. She didn't have his training, she didn't have his background. What she had was a mind like a diamond, hard, multifaceted, capable of cutting through anything, and a determination that matched his own. "It'll hurt," he said, "the physical component. Your body isn't trained for this kind of movement. I'm aware of what training involves, and you'll need to keep it secret from everyone, not because it's wrong, but because the advantage disappears the moment people know you have it." "I understand operational security, Harry. I read your occlumency materials." He smiled, threw the knife one more time, center, and summoned it back. "Tomorrow, 5 a.m., where something you can move in." "Thank you, don't thank me yet. You're going to hate me by 6. She didn't hate him by 6. She hated him by 5:20 when the footwork drills reduced her to a gasping, red-faced mess on the classroom floor. But she got up. She always got up. And by the end of the week, her feet were faster, her wand grip was better, and the first spark of combat instinct was beginning to kindle behind those sharp brown eyes. Ron found out because Ron always found out, not through intelligence or deduction, but through the simple loyalty of a friend who noticed when 2 of his people disappeared every morning before breakfast. He turned up on day 4, looked at Hermione's bruised knees and Harry's knife collection, said "wicked," and asked to join. Ron's talent was different from Hermione's. Where she was precision and analysis, Ron was instinct and spatial awareness. He understood positioning without being taught where to stand, where to move, how to control a space. Harry recognized it immediately. Ron had the mind of a tactician. Give him a chessboard and he'd beat anyone in the school. Give him a battlefield and he'd know where the threats were before they materialized. "It's your family," Harry told him, after watching Ron navigate a movement drill with an ease that surprised all 3 of them. "You grew up with 5 older brothers. You learned to read a room and find the safe angles before you could walk. More like I learned where to stand so Fred and George's experiments wouldn't hit me." Same thing. By December, they were training together every morning. Harry leading, Hermione and Ron following, and the 3 of them growing into something that was more than friendship. It was a unit, a team. The kind of bond that forms when you sweat and struggle and push past your limits together, when you trust someone to watch your back because you've watched theirs. Christmas approached and the castle emptied. Most students went home for the holidays. Ron's family was visiting his brother Charlie in Romania. Hermione went home to her parents. Harry stayed. Not because he had nowhere to go. John had sent word through continental channels that he was welcome home, that the apartment was waiting, that he missed his son in the particular way that John Wick missed things, which was silently and absolutely. Harry missed him too, but staying was strategic. The castle would be nearly empty over Christmas. Fewer students, fewer teachers, fewer eyes. If Quirrell was going to make a move, the holidays were the window, and there was something else. Something Harry had discovered in his mapping of the castle that demanded investigation. He'd found it 2 weeks before the holiday break on one of his pre-dawn exploration runs. A room on the 4th floor, behind a door that he'd passed a dozen times without noticing, and Harry noticed everything, which meant the room didn't want to be noticed. He'd felt the enchantment when he finally detected it, a notice-me-not charm of extraordinary subtlety, layered over a concealment ward that gently redirected attention away from the door. He'd broken through both, not with force but with patience, the way Marlowe had taught him to dismantle wards, peeling back layers like an archaeologist brushing dirt from a fossil. Door opened into a large, unused classroom, dusty and cold, and in the center of the room stood a mirror. It was tall, floor to ceiling, with an ornate gold frame carved with symbols that Harry's magical perception identified as old, possibly pre-medieval. An inscription ran along the top, Eris stra eruoit ube cafruoit on wosi. Harry read it backward without thinking. I show not your face but your heart's desire. He stood in front of the mirror and looked. What he saw stole his breath. John was there, standing behind him, hand on his shoulder, the way he always stood. And beside John, people Harry had never met but recognized instantly from the photographs Marlowe had shown him. A man with messy black hair and glasses and a grin that was pure mischief. A woman with dark red hair and green eyes, his mother's eyes. James and Lily Potter standing in the mirror looking at him with expressions of such love and pride and loss that Harry's chest constricted and his vision blurred. They were together, all of them, his birth parents and his father. The family he had and the family he'd lost, united in the mirror's glass, and they were looking at him the way family looks at you, not as a weapon or a symbol or a prophecy, but as a boy. Their boy. Harry stood in front of the mirror of Eris for a long time, longer than he should have. The mirror's pull was narcotic, a warmth, a comfort, a whispered promise that if he just stayed here, just kept looking, the ache in his chest would ease and the people in the glass would be real. He recognized what was happening. The mirror was showing him his heart's desire, and his heart's desire was family, the complete unbroken version, the one where no one died and no one was taken and no one ended up in a dumpster. It was a weapon. Not a malicious one necessarily, but a weapon nonetheless. A trap for the wanting, a cage made of your own need. He stepped back, breathed, let the warmth drain away and the steel return. I see you, he said to the mirror, to the people in it. I see what you're showing me, and I understand. He looked at his mother's face one last time, green eyes, his eyes, the woman who had died for him, whose sacrifice had burned Voldemort's killing, cursed back on itself and left Harry alive with a scar and a soul fragment and a destiny he hadn't asked for. I'll finish it, he said quietly. For you. He turned and walked out. He didn't go back. On Christmas morning, he found a package at the foot of his bed. Wrapped in silver paper, no card, no name. Inside was a cloak, fluid, shimmering, made of material that felt like water woven into silk. When he draped it over his shoulders, his body vanished, an invisibility cloak. His father's, James Potter's, according to a note that appeared when he unfolded it. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well, no signature. But the handwriting was the same flowing, fussy script that had addressed his Hogwarts letter. Dumbledore. Harry held the cloak and thought about what it meant, a gift from Dumbledore. An invisibility cloak returned to its rightful owner on Christmas morning, with a note that was warm and personal and designed to create a sense of obligation and gratitude. A tool, an extremely valuable tool, given freely, with no stated conditions. Dumbledore didn't do anything without reason. The cloak was another test, or a facilitator, a way to give Harry the means to explore the castle unseen, to find the mirror, to face the protections on the 3rd floor. Dumbledore was arming him and pointing him in a direction and waiting to see what happened. Harry put the cloak on, felt the cool shimmer of invisibility settle over him, looked in the dorm room mirror and saw nothing, an empty room, a bed, the absent space where a boy should have been. He took it off, folded it carefully. Placed it in his trunk, then he opened the other packages. A hand-knitted sweater from Mrs. Weasley, Ron's mother, who had never met Harry but had included him in the family gift rotation because Ron had told her Harry was staying at school, and that was enough for Molly Weasley. It was emerald green with a large H on the front, and it was the most aggressively comfortable garment Harry had ever touched. A box of homemade fudge, also from Mrs. Weasley. A book on advanced defensive theory from Hermione. A set of chocolate frogs from Ron. And from John, delivered by Continental Courier to Hogsmeade and brought to the castle by Dobby the house elf, a small, flat leather case. Harry opened it. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a new knife. Not carbon steel, something else. Dark metal with a faint, iridescent sheen that Harry's magical senses recognized as goblin-forged. A blade made by the same craftsman who made Gringotts doors. Unbreakable, capable of absorbing and channeling magic, and on the handle, engraved in small, precise letters, H.W. Harry Wick. He held the knife and felt its weight, perfect, balanced, an extension of his hand, and he smiled, and it was Christmas, and he was alone in a castle, and he was armed, and he was ready. The break passed, students returned, January bled into February, February into March. Quirrell grew more agitated as the months progressed, the stuttering worsened, the turban seemed to cause him more distress, and the garlic smell in his classroom became overwhelming. Harry watched it all with patient, systematic attention, building his operational picture, waiting for the trigger. He spent the time honing his team. Hermione's combat casting had improved dramatically. She could throw a stunner while moving laterally, maintain a shield while advancing, and her spell repertoire had expanded well beyond the first-year curriculum. She devoured the occlumency training, and by March had basic shields in place that would stop casual legilimency. Ron had discovered a talent for tactical thinking that Harry encouraged ruthlessly. They spent evenings in the common room with a chessboard, Ron's chosen medium for strategic thought, and Harry learned to read Ron's mind the way it worked, in spatial patterns, in predictions, in the ability to see 6 moves ahead, and understand what your opponent wanted before they knew it themselves. Quirrell's going to make his move soon, Ron said one evening, moving his queen with the casual confidence of someone who'd already won the game 3 moves ago. He's running out of time. School ends in June. Whatever he's after, he has to get it before then. Why before then? Hermione asked, studying the board. Because Dumbledore's here during the school year. The castle's full of teachers, security's as high as it gets. If Quirrell hasn't made his move by June, he has to wait until September, and by then Dumbledore might move the stone somewhere else, or Quirrell's host body might fail. He's deteriorating. Whatever's in that turban is eating him alive. Harry looked at Ron with the quiet satisfaction of a teacher watching a student surpass expectations. That's exactly right. Plus, Ron added, taking Hermione's bishop, Dumbledore's been called away twice this month. Ministry business. Each time, Quirrell perked up. Watch the staff table like a hawk. He's waiting for Dumbledore to leave. When Dumbledore leaves, Quirrell moves, Harry said. And when Quirrell moves, we go. We, Hermione said. Harry, if you're right about Quirrell being possessed by Voldemort, I'm right. Then this isn't a school adventure. This is a confrontation with the darkest wizard of the century. The shade of the darkest wizard of the century. Weakened, desperate, trapped in a failing host body. He's never going to be more vulnerable than he is right now. That doesn't mean he's not dangerous. Everything's dangerous. That's not a reason to wait. Hermione was quiet for a moment. She moved her knight. Ron took it immediately. I'm coming with you, she said. So am I, Ron said. No, Harry said. Both of them looked at him. I need you, but not in the room with Quirrell. I need you getting me through whatever's between Fluffy and the stone. The challenges, the teacher's protections. Dumbledore designed them as a gauntlet, a series of tests. Some of them I can handle alone. Some of them I might not. That's where you come in. And when we get to the end, Ron asked, you stop, I go on alone. Harry, this isn't negotiable, Ron. Voldemort killed my parents. Whatever happens in that room is between him and me. And I need to know you're both safe and behind me, not in the crossfire. The words hung between them. Ron looked like he wanted to argue. Hermione looked like she wanted to argue more. But they both saw Harry's face, and they both saw the thing behind his eyes, not anger, not fear, but certainty. The absolute forged steel certainty of a boy who had been prepared for this moment his entire life. Okay, Ron said, okay, but if you die I'm going to kill you. That's the spirit. Hermione didn't smile. You come back, Harry. You come back or I'll find a way to resurrect you just so I can hex you into next year. Deal. The trigger came in June. Harry was at breakfast when the owl arrived, not a school owl, but a sleek, dark bird that landed in front of Dumbledore at the staff table and delivered a message that the headmaster read with the particular stillness of a man receiving news he'd been expecting. Dumbledore rose, spoke briefly to McGonagall, and left the great hall. Harry watched him go. Then he looked at the staff table. Quirrell was eating porridge with trembling hands, and his eyes were tracking Dumbledore's exit with an intensity that dropped every pretense of performance. Under the table, Harry tapped Ron's knee, twice, their signal. Ron looked at the staff table, saw Quirrell, saw the empty headmaster's chair. Tapped Hermione's foot. Hermione looked, understood. They finished breakfast in silence and met in the empty classroom on the 7th floor 30 minutes later. Tonight, Harry said. How do you know? Hermione asked. Because Dumbledore just left the castle and Quirrell saw him go, and Quirrell's been waiting for this for months. He'll move tonight after curfew when the castle's quiet. Then we move first, Ron said. We move first. Harry laid out the plan. Simple, plain, built on the intelligence he'd been gathering all year. They would go after dinner, before curfew, using the invisibility cloak to get past patrols. Harry would handle Fluffy. He'd prepared a small enchanted music box that played a continuous lullaby, acquired through Dobby's network of house elf contacts. Beyond Fluffy and the trapdoor, they'd face the teacher's challenges. Ron would handle anything that required tactical thinking. Hermione would handle anything that required logic or knowledge. Harry would handle anything that required combat. At the final challenge, whatever Dumbledore had set up to protect the stone itself, Harry would go on alone. And if Quirrell gets there before us, Hermione asked, then I deal with Quirrell, and Voldemort, Hermione's jaw tightened. She pulled her wand from her sleeve, not the gentle, two-fingered grip the school taught, but the firm combat grip Harry had drilled into her, and nodded. Let's go over the protections one more time. They did every detail, every contingency, every possible point of failure and the response to each. By the time they finished, the plan was tight, clean, and as close to foolproof as anything could be when one of the variables was an immortality-seeking dark wizard. They went at 8 o'clock. The invisibility cloak covered all three of them if they pressed close together, Hermione in the middle, Ron hunching to keep his feet hidden, Harry leading. They moved through the corridors in silence, 3 sets of footsteps that were quieter than they had any right to be, thanks to the movement training Harry had been drilling into them for months. The 3rd floor corridor was as Harry had left it, dark, cold, the smell of dog. He produced the music box from his pocket, a small, silver thing that looked antique and played a melody that was simple and sweet, and had the particular quality of a lullaby designed to put something very large to sleep. He set it on the floor and opened it. The music tinkled through the corridor, thin and delicate, and from behind the door the growling stopped. There was a heavy thud, the sound of something enormous lying down, and then a rumbling, resonant snore that vibrated through the stone floor. Harry opened the door. Fluffy was asleep, all 3 heads resting on massive paws, drool pooling on the floor. The trapdoor was exposed. They moved quickly. Harry lifted the trapdoor. It opened onto darkness, a shaft dropping into nothing. How far down? Ron whispered. One way to find out. Harry dropped through. He fell for about 2 seconds and landed on something soft. Very soft, too soft. It was a plant, a massive tangle of thick, dark vines that cushioned his landing, and then immediately began to move. Tendrils wrapped around his ankles, his wrists, began pulling him down into the mass, Devil's Snare. Harry recognized it from herbology. It reacted to struggle. The more you fought, the tighter it gripped, but it hated light and heat. He didn't struggle. He relaxed completely, the way John had taught him to relax when restrained, going boneless, sinking into the grip instead of fighting it, and at the same time he gathered magic in his palm. Not wand magic, raw magic. Heat and light condensed into a point. He released it. A burst of white fire erupted from his hand, not shaped or channeled, but raw and overwhelming, and the Devil's Snare recoiled violently, vines whipping back, releasing him. He fell through the loosened mass and landed on stone. It's Devil's Snare, Hermione's voice from above. Relax and drop, I'll handle it. She landed beside him 2 seconds later, already casting, a focused jet of blue flame that drove the snare back and cleared a space for Ron, who dropped through with considerably less grace and a string of profanity that would have impressed a continental bartender. I hate plants, Ron said, picking vine residue off his robes. Noted, move, they move. The corridor beyond the snare led deeper, and the air changed, colder, damper, with the particular feeling of deep underground. The passage opened into a large, high-ceilinged chamber, and the air was full of something, glittering, fluttering, catching the torchlight. Keys, hundreds of them, winged keys flying in patterns around the chamber like a flock of deranged birds. At the far end of the room, a heavy wooden door with an iron lock. We need the right key, Hermione said, scanning the swarm. Big, old-fashioned silver, probably with a bent wing because someone's already caught it and used it before, Ron said, his eyes tracking the patterns. Harry looked at him. Ron shrugged. It's pattern recognition, same thing as chess, look there, he pointed. That one, silver, large bow, bent left wing, it's flying slower than the others because the wing's damaged. 3 broomsticks hovered by the door, the intended method of catching the key. Harry ignored them. He raised his wand, tracked the silver key for a single rotation of its pattern, and cast a key. The key fought the summoning charm. It was enchanted to resist exactly this approach, but Harry's magic was not a schoolchild's magic. He poured force into the charm, raw and focused, and the key shuddered in midair, jerked, and shot toward him like a bullet. He caught it one-handed, felt the wings beating against his palm, and walked to the door and unlocked it. Ron looked at the broomsticks. "I think we were supposed to fly. Probably. Your way was faster. Usually is." Beyond the door was a chessboard. A massive one, life-sized pieces carved from black and white stone, standing on a board that stretched across the entire chamber. The pieces were tall, heavy, and had the particular menace of things that were designed to hurt you. Ron's eyes lit up. "Oh," he said, "oh, this is mine." He walked onto the board. The pieces shifted, the white side taking their positions, the black side waiting. Ron studied the board for less than 10 seconds. "Harry, take the bishop's position. Hermione, rook, don't move until I tell you to." They took their positions. The game began. Ron played chess the way John fought, with an economy and a precision that turned complexity into simplicity. He sacrificed pieces without hesitation, traded advantages for position, and systematically dismantled the white side's defense with a strategic clarity that was, frankly, beautiful to watch. The white pieces grew more aggressive as the game progressed, smashing captured pieces with a violence that sent stone fragments flying across the chamber. Ron didn't flinch. He moved his pieces and waited and moved again, and 12 minutes after the game began, he said, "Harry, 3 squares forward and left, that's checkmate." Harry moved. The white king threw his crown to the ground. Ron exhaled, grinned. "Best game I've ever played." "Brilliant," Hermione breathed. "Ron, that was absolutely brilliant." Ron's ears went red. He mumbled something about it being nothing, and Harry clapped him on the shoulder and they moved on. The next room was already handled. A massive troll, larger than the Halloween one, lay unconscious on the floor. Someone had been here before them. Quirrell, he'd already passed through. "He's ahead of us," Hermione said. Then we moved faster. The next chamber was fire. They walked in and flames erupted behind them and ahead of them. Purple fire at the entrance, black fire at the exit. In the center of the room, a table with 7 bottles and a scroll. Hermione snatched the scroll and read it. Her eyes moved fast, her lips moving slightly, and Harry could practically see the logic circuits firing. "It's a puzzle. Poison, wine, and 2 potions, one to go forward, one to go back." "The logic is," she trailed off, reading, calculating. "Okay, the smallest bottle goes forward, the round one goes back." She picked up the smallest bottle. There was barely a swallow in it. "There's only enough for 1 person," she said. She looked at Harry. Her eyes were steady, but he could see what it cost her, the fear she was controlling, the trust she was extending. "This is where I go on," Harry said. "Harry, Hermione, take the round bottle, go back, get Ron, find a way to send a message to Dumbledore, use the owl system, use the fireplace in the staff room, use whatever works. Tell him Quirrell's gone after the stone. And if Dumbledore doesn't come in time, then it won't matter because I'll have already handled it." Hermione looked at him for a long moment, then she stepped forward and hugged him. It was fierce and brief, and she pulled back before either of them could feel awkward about it. "You're the best wizard I've ever met," she said. "You're the best witch I've ever met. Now go." She drank the round bottle, shuddered at the taste, and walked back through the purple flames. Gone. Harry picked up the smallest bottle, looked at the black fire ahead of him. Beyond it was the final chamber. Beyond it was Quirrell. Beyond it was Voldemort. He drank. The potion spread through him like ice water, and he walked through the black fire and it didn't touch him. And he emerged on the other side into a chamber that was large and circular and lit by torchlight, and in the center of the chamber was the mirror of Erised, and in front of the mirror was Quirrell. The turban was gone. Quirrell stood before the mirror with his back to Harry, and his head was bare, and on the back of his head, growing out of it, part of it, fused to it, was a face. A face that was not Quirrell's. It was flat and white, with slitted nostrils like a snake, and red eyes that burned with a light that was not reflection but generation. Harry had seen photographs of Voldemort. Marlowe had shown him. The face on the back of Quirrell's head was a ruined echo of those photographs, diminished, parasitic, the remnant of something that had once been terrifying and was now simply desperate. "I wondered when you'd come," the face said. The voice was high and cold and carried the particular authority of someone who had once commanded armies and was now speaking through the back of another man's skull. Harry walked into the chamber and stopped 10 feet from Quirrell. "Turn around," Harry said. Quirrell turned. His face, his real face, the front one, was gaunt and gray and hollow-eyed. The nervousness was gone. The stuttering was gone. What was left was a man who had been consumed from the inside and had stopped pretending otherwise. "Harry Potter," Voldemort's face said from the back of Quirrell's turned head. "The boy who lived, we meet at last, come to protect the stone. How noble, how predictable." "The stone's not yours," Harry said. His voice was flat, level, the voice John used when the talking was almost over. "No, Quirrell, show the boy what you've been doing." Quirrell turned back to the mirror, and Harry saw his hands were pressed against the glass, and his expression was frantic, desperate. "I see the stone," Quirrell whispered. "I see myself presenting it to my master." I can't reach it. The mirror shows your desire, not reality," Harry said. "You can't take what it shows you, that's the trap." Quirrell and Voldemort both went still. "Clever boy," Voldemort's voice said. "You understand the mirror, then perhaps you understand what it would show you." "I know exactly what it shows me." "Then look in the mirror, Harry Potter, see what your heart desires." Harry didn't move. No, I didn't come here for the stone, I came here for you." Silence, the torchlight flickered. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed. "For me," he repeated. "You killed my parents, you put a piece of your soul in my head. You've spent 10 years as a parasite, feeding off other people, hiding in shadows, running from death. And now you're here in a school, trying to steal an old man's science project so you can claw your way back to a body." Harry's voice hadn't risen. It was steady, calm, the way John spoke when the gun was already drawn. "You're pathetic." The room temperature dropped. Quirrell flinched. Voldemort's face contorted, rage, pure and absolute, the rage of something that had been the most feared wizard in the world and was now being called pathetic by an 11-year-old. "You dare, I dare, I've been daring my whole life. You don't scare me, Riddle. You're a ghost wearing a dead man's head. And I'm going to finish what my mother started." "Kill him," Voldemort screamed. Quirrell spun. His wand came up fast, faster than the stuttering act would have suggested, the speed of a man with real training, and a jet of green light erupted from the tip. The killing curse. Harry was already moving. He'd read the cast before it happened, the particular arm motion, the widening of the eyes, the intake of breath that preceded the two-word incantation. He moved laterally, fast, dropping below the spell's trajectory as it passed over his head and struck the wall behind him in an explosion of green sparks and shattered stone. He didn't draw his wand, not yet. He closed the distance. 3 steps, fast, low, angled. Combat geometry, the art of approaching a ranged attacker by staying off the center line, never where they expect you to be. Quirrell fired again, not the killing curse this time, a blasting hex, and Harry deflected it with a wandless shield that he threw up with his left hand while his right closed around Quirrell's wand arm. The effect was immediate and devastating. Where Harry's skin touched Quirrell's flesh began to burn, not metaphorically, literally. Blisters erupted across the man's wrist and forearm, the skin blackening and cracking, and Quirrell screamed with a sound that was more animal than human and wrenched himself backward. Harry's mother's protection, the ancient magic that Lily's sacrifice had woven into Harry's blood. Marlowe had theorized about it, a love-based ward that would activate against Voldemort's touch. She'd been right. Quirrell staggered back, cradling his burned arm. His wand clattered to the floor. Voldemort was screaming, "Kill him, use the other hand, kill him," and Quirrell lunged forward with his other hand outstretched, reaching for Harry's throat. Harry caught the hand, grabbed it with both of his. Held on, the burning intensified. Quirrell's hand blistered and cracked and began to disintegrate, the flesh turning to ash, and Quirrell was screaming and Voldemort was screaming, and the room was full of the sound and the stench of burning, and Harry held on because this was the moment, this was the opening, and you never let go of an advantage. Quirrell's body was failing, coming apart. The magic that held Voldemort's shade to the flesh was fighting the protection in Harry's blood, and the protection was winning, and Quirrell was crumbling from the points of contact outward. With his last coherent breath, Quirrell threw Harry off. Force of it magical, desperate, the dying convulsion of a host body burning alive sent Harry flying backward. He hit the wall hard, felt the impact in his ribs and his spine, and he slid to the floor with his vision blurring and his ears ringing. Quirrell was standing in the center of the room, swaying. His face was a ruin of burns and agony, and his hands were charred stumps, and Voldemort's face on the back of his head was screaming a continuous high, terrible scream. Then Quirrell collapsed. He hit the stone floor and didn't move, and from the ruin of his body something rose, a dark, shapeless thing, a shadow with red eyes, a shade that was Voldemort stripped of everything except will and hate. It hung in the air for a moment, it looked at Harry. Harry looked at it. "Next time," Harry said from the floor, with blood on his lip and fire in his eyes, "I won't let you run." The shade screamed. A sound that was fury and fear and the particular agony of something that could not die and could not live, and it tore through the room like a black wind, passing through Harry, a moment of cold so intense it stopped his heart for a beat, and then it was gone. Through the wall. Into the night, running, Harry lay on the floor and breathed. His ribs were bruised, his hands were raw, his scar was bleeding, actually bleeding, the old wound reopened by the proximity to Voldemort's soul. Something was in his pocket that hadn't been there before. He reached in and pulled out a stone, red, smooth, pulsing with a warmth that was almost alive. The philosopher's stone. The mirror had given it to him, not because he wanted to use it, because he didn't. That was the trick. The mirror gave the stone to the person who wanted to protect it, not the person who wanted to use it. Dumbledore's final protection. Harry held the stone in his bloody hand and looked at the ceiling and started to laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. He was 11 years old, lying on the floor of a dungeon, holding the secret to immortality, and the most dangerous dark wizard in history had just run from him. He stopped laughing, pushed himself to his feet, swayed, steadied. He looked at Quirrell's body on the floor, dead, the host destroyed, the parasite fled. Harry didn't feel guilt. He didn't feel triumph. He felt the clear, quiet certainty of a job completed and a threat neutralized for now, and the knowledge that the real fight was still coming. Voldemort had run, but Voldemort would come back. The Horcruxes were still out there, the Shade was still out there, and one day it would find a way to rebuild itself, and when it did, it would come for Harry. Harry put the stone in his pocket and walked toward the black fire. It had died down, the potion's magic was fading. He stepped through the embers and into the corridor beyond. He made it halfway back through the chambers, past the empty bottle table, past the chessboard, past the unconscious troll, before his vision grayed and his legs buckled, and he caught himself against the wall and slid to the floor. The last thing he saw before consciousness left was a figure at the end of the corridor, tall, silver-bearded, moving fast, blue eyes blazing, and then the gray closed in and he was gone. He woke up in the hospital wing, white ceiling, clean sheets, the smell of potions and antiseptic, sunlight through high windows, which meant it was at least the next day. He lay still and assessed, ribs sore but functional, probably healed, hands bandaged but he could feel his fingers. Head aching, the scar tender and hot. He was alive, he was intact. He sat up. Dumbledore was sitting in a chair beside his bed. The old wizard looked exactly as he always did, serene, grandfatherly, those blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. He was wearing robes of deep purple with silver stars, and his hands were folded in his lap, and his expression was the picture of gentle concern. Harry looked at him. Dumbledore looked at Harry. "Good morning, Harry," Dumbledore said. "Headmaster, you've been asleep for 3 days. Your friends are quite worried. Mr. Weasley has attempted to break into the hospital wing 4 times, and Miss Granger has written a 12-page letter to your father." Harry filed that. "Quirrell, dead, I'm afraid. The protections on your skin, your mother's sacrifice, proved incompatible with his continued existence. And Voldemort, gone for now. His shade fled the castle. Where it went, I cannot yet determine." Harry nodded. He reached into, but his hospital gown had no pockets. He looked at Dumbledore. "The stone, safe. I removed it from your pocket while you slept. It has been returned to Nicholas Flamel, who has agreed, after some discussion, to destroy it." "Good." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. "Good. Most people would be disappointed to see the secret of immortality destroyed. Most people haven't seen what the desire for immortality does to a person. Voldemort wanted that stone because he's afraid to die. The stone isn't a solution, it's a delay. Destroy it." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. The twinkle in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something more serious, more assessing. The grandfatherly mask shifted, and behind it Harry caught a glimpse of the real Dumbledore, the chess player, the strategist, the man who moved pieces across boards that spanned decades. "You're not what I expected, Harry," Dumbledore said. "I know. When I placed you with your mother's relatives, I intended. I wasn't placed with anyone. I was thrown in a dumpster." The words landed in the hospital wing like a slap. Dumbledore's face changed, a flicker of something that might have been shock, might have been guilt. "Yes," he said quietly. "I've since learned what happened. The protections I arranged were intercepted. A Death Eater. The child I believed was safe with the Dursleys was, in fact, never delivered. By the time I realized the truth, you had already been found. By my father. By John Wick." "Yes," Dumbledore's tone was careful. "I've learned a great deal about Mr. Wick in the past year. He is not what I would have chosen for you. He's everything I needed. He's a killer, Harry. He's my father." Harry's voice was flat, final, the same voice John used when a conversation was over. "He found me in the garbage, and he raised me, and he loved me, and he made me what I am. You don't get to judge that. You left me on a doorstep and hoped for the best, and someone intercepted me and threw me away. My father is the reason I'm alive." Dumbledore absorbed this. His expression was complex: regret, assessment, the recalculation of a strategy that had been built on assumptions that turned out to be wrong. "You're right," he said. "I failed you. I believed my protections were sufficient, and they were not. I am sorry, Harry, truly." Harry studied the old man's face. The apology was sincere. He could read that much. But sincerity didn't erase calculation, and Dumbledore was always calculating. Even now, the apology served a purpose. It built trust, created a sense of openness, invited Harry to reciprocate with his own vulnerability. Harry didn't reciprocate. He gave a nod, acknowledgement, not forgiveness, and moved on. The Horcruxes, he said. Dumbledore went very still. I beg your pardon, Voldemort's Horcruxes, the soul fragments he created to anchor himself to life. I know about them, I know there are multiple, and I know one of them is in my scar. The hospital wing was silent. Dumbledore stared at Harry, and for the first time the twinkle was completely gone. What was left was raw, undisguised surprise, the look of a man who had kept a secret for years and had just heard it spoken by an 11-year-old in a hospital bed. How do you know this? Dumbledore asked. His voice was very controlled. Gringotts' blood identification. The goblins detected the soul fragment in my scar. I've already arranged for a curse-breaking examination this summer. Harry, the removal of a Horcrux from a living host is extraordinarily dangerous. The goblins are skilled, but more dangerous than carrying a piece of Voldemort's soul in my head. More dangerous than walking around with a connection to a dark wizard who can sense me and influence me and use me as a window into the world. Harry's voice was steady. I'm getting it removed, Headmaster, this summer. The goblins have agreed to examine me. My father has authorized the procedure. It's happening. I would ask you to reconsider. There are aspects of the Horcrux situation that the word was simple and complete and left no room for negotiation. Dumbledore looked at Harry, really looked, with the full weight of his considerable perception, and what he saw made him lean back in his chair. You've thought about this carefully, Dumbledore said. I've been thinking about it since I was 10, and nothing I say will change your mind. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. The sunlight moved across the hospital wing floor, slow and golden. Very well, he said. I would ask only that you keep me informed. The Horcrux situation is larger than the fragment in your scar, Harry. There are others, and they must all be found and destroyed if Voldemort is to be truly defeated. I know. Then perhaps we can work together on this. Not as headmaster and student, as allies. Harry looked at the old man. Allies, it was a specific word chosen carefully, not mentor and protege, not commander and soldier. Allies equals with a common enemy and separate agendas. It was the closest thing to respect that Dumbledore could offer without giving up control, and Harry recognized it for what it was. Allies share information, Harry said, both ways. Agreed. And allies don't manipulate each other. No more tests, no more unlocked doors and obstacle courses designed to see what I'll do. If you want to know something about me, ask. Dumbledore's expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been shame. You knew that the protections on the stone were a test, that the door was unlocked with a first-year charm, that the entire gauntlet was designed to be passable by a clever student. Yes, I knew, and you went anyway, because Voldemort was at the end of it. The test was irrelevant, the target wasn't. Dumbledore exhaled. It was a small sound, almost inaudible, but Harry heard it, and it carried the weight of a very old, very powerful man realizing that the world had produced something he hadn't planned for and couldn't control. You are extraordinary, Harry, Dumbledore said. I'm prepared, there's a difference. Dumbledore stood. He looked down at Harry in the hospital bed, small, bruised, bandaged, 11 years old and absolutely unbroken, and something in his blue eyes softened. Not the manufactured twinkle, something real. Your friends may visit now if you'd like. Please. Dumbledore turned to leave. He paused at the door. Harry, for what it's worth, I'm glad John Wick found you. He left before Harry could respond. 30 seconds later, the hospital wing doors burst open and Ron and Hermione came through like a small, concerned hurricane. Ron was carrying an armload of candy. Hermione was carrying an armload of books. Both of them were talking at the same time. 3 days, Harry, 3 days. I swear I almost wrote your father. I hope that's all right. I used the continental cipher you taught me. Dumbledore wouldn't let anyone in the old. Your injuries are documented in at least 4 medical texts. I checked. Harry sat in his hospital bed and looked at his friends, his team, his people, the family he was building, and he smiled. Not the controlled, careful smile he gave the world, the real one, the one that was just for them. I'm fine, he said. Sit down, I'll tell you everything. They sat, he told them. And outside the hospital wing windows, the Scottish sun was warm, and the grounds were green, and somewhere far away, a dark shade was fleeing through the world, weakened and furious and afraid. And Harry Wick was already thinking about next time. Chapter 5, The Code. The train ride back to London was different from the ride up. In September, Harry had boarded the Hogwarts Express as an unknown quantity, a name and a scar, an 11-year-old walking into a world that thought it knew his story. Now, 9 months later, he sat in the same compartment with Ron and Hermione, and the story had changed. Word had gotten out, the way word always gets out in a school full of teenagers. Harry Potter had faced Voldemort and walked away. The details were garbled. In some versions he'd fought a dragon, in others he'd dueled Dumbledore himself, but the core fact was solid and unkillable. The boy who lived had lived again. Harry didn't care about the reputation. Reputations were noise. What he cared about was sitting across from him. Ron, who had navigated a life-sized chess game with the calm precision of a born strategist, and Hermione, who had solved a logic puzzle under pressure and then had the courage to walk away when walking away was harder than going forward. They'd been tested and they'd held. That mattered. Everything else was just talk. The countryside rolled past the windows, green hills and hedgerows and the occasional village, England in early summer, warm and bright and oblivious to the things that happened in hidden castles. Ron was eating a cauldron cake with the focused dedication he brought to all food. Hermione was reading because Hermione was always reading, but her eyes kept drifting from the page to Harry and back, and Harry knew she had things to say but was choosing her moment. "Go ahead," he said. She looked up. "What? You've been wanting to say something since we left Hogsmeade. Your left foot taps when you're holding something back. Just say it." Hermione's left foot stopped tapping. She closed her book. "The Horcrux removal, this summer, you're really going through with it." "I told Dumbledore I told you I was. Nothing's changed." "Everything's changed. You fought Voldemort, Harry. You touched Quirrell and he burned. That protection, your mother's protection, it works because of the connection between you and Voldemort. The soul fragment in your scar is part of that connection. If the goblins remove it, the protection might fail. I know, you know. Marlowe and I discussed it 2 years ago. The protection is tied to the blood, not the Horcrux. The soul fragment is a parasite. It's not what keeps me safe. My mother's sacrifice is in my blood, in my skin, in my magical core. The Horcrux is a piece of Voldemort that got stuck when the curse rebounded. They're related but not dependent. Removing the fragment shouldn't affect the protection. Shouldn't. But even if it does, even if removing the Horcrux strips the blood protection completely, I'm still getting it out. I won't carry a piece of that man inside me, not for one more year, not for one more day longer than necessary. Ron had stopped eating, which was significant. What if it's dangerous, the removal? The goblins are the best curse breakers in the world. They've been dealing with soul magic for centuries. It's part of their vault security protocols. Dark wizards have been trying to hide Horcruxes in Gringotts vault since before Hogwarts was built. The goblins know how to extract them. From objects, Hermione said, not from people, from anything, I asked. The senior cursebreaker Ragnarok said the procedure is more complex with a living host, but it's been done before, twice in recorded goblin history, both times successfully. And the 2 people who went through it, what happened to them afterward? Harry was quiet for a moment. One lived a full life, the other died 7 years later in an unrelated incident. An unrelated incident, bar fight in Prague, not relevant. Ron snorted. Hermione didn't. Harry, I need you to hear me. I'm not trying to talk you out of it. I'm trying to make sure you've thought about it from every angle, because that's what I do, and because you're my friend, and because if something goes wrong, her voice caught just slightly and she pressed on. If something goes wrong, I need to know that every option was considered. Harry looked at her. Hermione Granger, 11 years old, muggle-born, brilliant and brave, and so fiercely loyal that it sometimes scared her. She'd walked into a room full of enchanted fire for him. She'd sent a coded message to an assassin's hotel for him. She'd spent months learning to fight, actually fight, not the sanitized dueling of textbooks, because he'd asked her to. Every option has been considered, he said. My dad and Marlowe and I have been planning this for over a year. The goblins have been consulted, the risks are understood, and Hermione, I appreciate you, I mean that, you make me better. Hermione's eyes glistened. She blinked it away fast, the way she always did, converting emotion into action. Well, she said, then you'd better write to us this summer, detailed updates. I want to know the procedure, the recovery, the side effects, everything. Through continental channels, not Owl Post. Obviously, I'm not an amateur. Ron looked between them. Am I the only one who doesn't have a secret spy network? Yes, Harry and Hermione said simultaneously. Brilliant, just checking. The train rolled on. They talked about summer plans, about next year, about the defense against the dark arts position that was now vacant again because the last professor had crumbled into ash. Ron theorized that the position was cursed. Hermione said that was superstitious nonsense. Harry didn't comment because Marlowe's notes had mentioned the curse placed by Voldemort decades ago when Dumbledore had refused him the teaching post, and it was one more item on the long list of things Tom Riddle had broken that would eventually need fixing. The train slowed. London materialized outside the windows, the sprawl of it, gray and brown and alive, the Muggle world reasserting itself with the particular indifference of a city that didn't know magic existed and wouldn't have been impressed if it did. King's Cross, platform 9 3/4. The students poured out of the train into the arms of waiting families, and the platform was a chaos of trunks and owls and reunions, and Harry stepped off the train and scanned the crowd. John was there. He was standing at the far end of the platform, away from the families, away from the noise. Dark suit, hands in pockets, still as a photograph. He looked the same, of course he looked the same. He always looked the same contained, lethal stillness that had been the backdrop to Harry's entire life. But Harry, who knew his father the way a musician knows their instrument, saw the details. The slight tension around the eyes that meant he hadn't slept well. The way his weight was shifted slightly forward, the way it did when he was ready to move fast. The controlled, deliberate patience of a man who had been waiting and was done waiting. Harry walked toward him. Not running, Wick didn't run toward reunions. But his pace was faster than it needed to be, and when he reached John, he stopped and they stood face to face, and John's hand came up and gripped the back of his neck. Neither of them spoke for a moment. John's eyes moved over Harry, cataloging, assessing, the way he assessed everything, reading the new scars and the new confidence and the subtle changes that 9 months had written on his son. Harry stood under the scrutiny and let it happen because it was love expressed in the only language John spoke fluently. "You've grown," John said, "half an inch. Your hands." Harry looked at his hands. The burns from Quirrell's skin were healed, goblin-derived healing potions, administered in the hospital wing, but the faintest traces of scarring remained. New scars on top of old training calluses. "They're fine," Harry said. "Hermione's letter said you fought Voldemort hand to hand. She wasn't supposed to include that much detail. She's thorough. I like her." Harry looked at his father. John looked back. The platform was emptying around them, families drifting toward the barrier, the noise fading. "I killed Quirrell," Harry said, his body, the man Voldemort was possessing. "I grabbed him and held on, and the protection burned him and he died." John didn't flinch, didn't look away. "How was it different from the first one? The first time, the man in the apartment, it was fast, clinical. I didn't think about it. This time I thought about it. I held on and I watched it happen and I chose not to let go. And after I was okay, I'm still okay. It's just it sits different when you choose it, when it's not reflex." John's hand tightened on his neck, not painfully, firmly, anchoring. "It should sit different," he said. "The day it doesn't is the day something's broken. But Harry, listen to me. What you did was necessary. The man was a vessel for something that wants to destroy you. You defended yourself. You defended others. That's not murder. That's the code, the code. You don't start fights, you finish them. You protect the people who can't protect themselves. And when something comes for you or yours, you put it down. That's what you did." Harry nodded, the tightness in his chest, the thing he'd been carrying since the chamber, the weight of a second killing that sat different from the first, eased, not gone, but lighter, shared. "Thanks, Dad. Let's go home." They walked through the barrier together into King's Cross, into the Muggle world. John had a car waiting, not a Continental car, a rental, because they were in London and John's operational security was reflexive. They drove to the hotel in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who don't need words to communicate. The hotel was the same one they'd used in August, the Stafford, with its Continental-adjacent courtesies and its fourth-floor suite. Harry dropped his trunk in his room, changed out of his school robes into jeans and a t-shirt, and found John in the sitting room with 2 glasses on the table. Bourbon for John, water for Harry. Harry sat across from his father and picked up the water and took a drink. John picked up the bourbon and did the same. "Tell me everything," John said. Harry told him, not the edited version, not the strategic summary he'd given Dumbledore. Everything from the sorting to the mapping to the troll to the corridor to the mirror to the stone. He told it the way John had taught him to debrief, chronological, factual, with emotional content included, because emotion was data and data that was suppressed was data that was lost. John listened the way John listened to everything, completely, without interruption, his dark eyes steady and focused. He asked no questions. He let Harry talk. It took over an hour. When Harry finished, the water was gone and John's bourbon was half empty, and the London afternoon was turning gold outside the windows. John was quiet for a long time. "The mirror," he said finally. "The one that shows your heart's desire. What did you see?" Harry had known this question was coming. He'd been thinking about the answer since December. "You," he said, "standing behind me, hand on my shoulder, and behind you, my birth parents, James and Lily, all of us together." John's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted, a deep, tectonic movement, the emotional equivalent of a continent adjusting. "All of us," he repeated. "All of us. You're my father, Dad. They're my parents." The mirror showed me a world where I didn't have to choose, where I had everyone. John took a drink of bourbon, set the glass down, picked it up, set it down again. "I never knew them," he said. "Your birth parents. I've read Marlowe's files. I know they were brave, that your mother was brilliant and your father was, well, apparently he was a troublemaker." The corner of his mouth twitched, "but I never knew them." You would have liked my mother. Marlowe says she was practical, direct, didn't take anyone's nonsense. Sounds familiar. And my father, James, Marlowe says he was reckless when he was young, arrogant, but he grew out of it. He died fighting Dad. He stood in the doorway of their house without a wand and tried to buy time for my mother and me. He knew he was going to die, and he did it anyway. That's courage. That's the code. He didn't start the fight, but he finished his part of it. John was very still. The light was fading outside, and the room was settling into the warm amber of evening, and father and son sat across from each other with their empty glasses and their full hearts, and the silence was the kind that says more than words. Your mother's protection, John said, the magic that burned Quirrell. Marlowe explained it to me once, that Lily's sacrifice created a ward in your blood. A protection that activates when Voldemort or his agents touch you. That's what saved me, in the chamber. Couldn't have beaten Quirrell with magic alone. He was a trained wizard possessed by Voldemort, channeling power I can't match yet. But the protection gave me a weapon he couldn't defend against. My bare hands. Your bare hands, John almost smiled. I taught you that. You taught me everything, not the magic. Number the magic is hers, my mother's, but the will to use it, the discipline, the training, the ability to think clearly when everything is on fire, that's yours. John finished his bourbon. He set the glass down with a decisive click that meant the emotional part of the conversation was over and the operational part was beginning. The Horcrux, Gringotts, when? The examination is scheduled for next week, Monday. If the Cursebreakers confirm they can remove the fragment, the procedure would be the following day. Recovery is estimated at 3 to 5 days. I'll be there, I know, and if something goes wrong, it won't. If something goes wrong, Harry. Harry looked at his father. John's face was the same controlled mask it always was, but his eyes were different, darker, more intense, carrying a weight that Harry recognized as the specific gravity of a parent contemplating the worst-case scenario. If something goes wrong, Harry said, you'll be there, and Marlowe, and Ragnarok, who's been breaking curses for 200 years. I'll have the best people in the world with me. That's not what I asked. Harry held his father's gaze. If something goes wrong, really wrong, worst case, then I die without a piece of Voldemort in my head. That's better than the alternative. No, John said, his voice was quiet and absolute. No, it is not. There is no version of reality where you dying is the better outcome. Not for me. Do you understand? Dad, I pulled you out of a dumpster, Harry. You were blue and cold and barely breathing, and I picked you up and I kept you. I built my entire life around you. Everything I've done for 11 years, every fight, every choice, every morning I got up and did the work has been for you. You don't get to die, not for a soul fragment, not for a prophecy, not for anything. The room was very quiet. The evening light was deep gold now, almost amber, and it caught the planes of John's face and made him look, for just a moment, like something carved from stone. Harry reached across the table and gripped his father's forearm. The same gesture John used, anchoring, grounding the physical language of their family. I'm not going to die, Dad. You'd better not. I promise. Wicks keep their promises. John looked at his son's hand on his arm. He put his own hand over it, held it. Yeah, he said, we do. They flew to New York the next morning. The Continental was exactly as Harry remembered it, the marble, the warm light, the quiet efficiency of a world that operated by its own rules. Karen was behind the desk, and when Harry walked through the lobby, the concierge's face performed that microscopic shift that on Karen qualified as an emotional breakdown. Mr. Potterwick, Karen said, welcome home. Just Harry, Uncle Karen, of course. Just Harry. Karen came around the desk, which he essentially never did, and stood in front of Harry and looked at him with the searching intensity of a man who was cataloging changes and finding them both impressive and concerning. You've changed. Good change or bad change. The kind of change that makes old men worry and proud in equal measure. He straightened Harry's collar, a gesture so paternal, so unlike the Karen that the Continental's residents knew, that a passing guest actually stopped walking to stare. Your room is prepared, your father's suite as well, and a message from Mr. Winston. He'd like to see you both in the lounge at your earliest convenience. Tell him we'll be there in an hour. Very good, sir. Harry went upstairs, showered, changed. He stood in front of the mirror in his room, not the mirror of Eris, just a regular mirror reflecting a regular boy, and looked at himself. Messy black hair, green eyes, the scar thin and red, lightning-shaped, shorter than he wanted to be, wiry, with the compact build of someone who'd been training their body for combat since they could walk. He looked 11. He didn't feel 11. He hadn't felt 11 in a long time, if he ever had. He went to the lounge. The Continental's lounge was a masterpiece of understated menace, dark leather, warm wood, the kind of lighting that made everyone look dangerous and expensive. A long bar ran the length of one wall, staffed by bartenders who could make any drink ever invented and who knew better than to remember who they'd served. Tables and booths provided privacy. The music was low and tasteful and could have been from any decade. Winston was in his usual booth, because Winston was always in his usual booth the way Karen was always behind the desk. It was a fundamental property of the Continental, like gravity or the no-killing rule. He had a glass of something amber and expensive, and he was wearing a suit that probably cost more than a car, and his expression when Harry and John sat down across from him was the particular mixture of calculation and grudging warmth that defined Winston's relationship with the Wick family. "Jonathan, Harry," he lifted his glass. "Congratulations on surviving your first year of wizard school. I understand there were complications." "A troll, a dark lord, and a logic puzzle," Harry said. "The usual, indeed." And Hermione's letter, which arrived via Continental courier, I might add, encoded in a cipher that my intelligence people needed 40 minutes to crack, suggested that you handled the complications with your customary efficiency. "She wasn't supposed to send that through your network. She improvised. I approve. The girl has potential." Winston took a sip. "Now to business." The warmth dialed back. The calculation dialed up. Winston was in management mode, and management mode meant that the things being discussed had implications beyond the personal. "Two issues," Winston said. "First, the magical world. Your appearance at Hogwarts, your performance there, and particularly your confrontation with the individual known as Voldemort have attracted attention. Our intelligence assets in London report that the British Ministry of Magic is now actively interested in Harry Potter, not just as a cultural figure, but as a strategic asset. Several factions within the ministry have begun inquiring about your background, your training, and your connections outside the magical world." "They won't find anything," John said. "They'll find more than you think. The magical world's intelligence capabilities are primitive compared to ours, but they have methods we can't counter: divination, scrying, certain forms of magical tracking. The protections Marlowe placed on Harry as a child were designed to shield him from casual detection, not sustained investigation. If the ministry directs serious resources toward finding out who raised Harry Potter and how, they'll eventually penetrate the cover." "What do you recommend?" Harry asked. Winston's eyebrows rose a fraction, the reaction of a man who had just been addressed as an equal by an 11-year-old and was deciding whether to be offended or impressed. He chose impressed, controlled disclosure. "Rather than waiting for them to dig and finding something unexpected, we provide a curated version of the truth. Harry Potter was raised by a private security consultant. International background, connected but legitimate. The assassin underworld stays invisible. The Continental stays invisible. What they see is a well-trained boy from a wealthy, private family." "That's close enough to the truth to hold up," Harry said. "Exactly. The best covers always are." "And the second issue?" Winston set his glass down. His expression shifted again, harder, more serious. "The High Table. The High Table. The governing body of the underworld, 12 seats, 12 powers, 12 organizations that controlled the global network of assassins, thieves, and killers that operated beneath the surface of the legitimate world. John had worked for them. John had defied them. The relationship was complicated in the way that relationships with powerful entities always are: respectful at a distance, dangerous up close." "What about the High Table?" John asked. His voice had changed, lower, flatter. The operational register that meant the conversation had moved into territory where mistakes had consequences. "They know about Harry. They've known for years. You can't raise a child in the Continental system without the table becoming aware, but they've treated it as a curiosity. John Wick's son, a domestic matter, not their concern. And now the table knows that John Wick's son is a wizard. More specifically, they know that John Wick's son is Harry Potter, the most significant figure in the magical world, a child of prophecy, someone who has already confronted and survived an encounter with the magical world's equivalent of a nuclear weapon. The table doesn't have extensive contacts in the magical world, but they have enough to understand the implications, which are, Harry is a bridge between our world and theirs. The magical world and the underworld have existed in parallel for centuries, aware of each other at the highest levels, occasionally cooperating on specific projects, but fundamentally separate. Harry changes that. He exists in both worlds. He has power in both worlds, and the table, being what it is now trying to determine whether Harry is an asset, a threat, or an opportunity. The lounge was quiet. At the bar, a woman in a red dress was drinking something clear and watching the room with the languid attention of a predator at rest. Two men in dark suits were playing chess at a corner table. The music played. "I'm not a piece on anyone's board," Harry said. Winston looked at him. Everyone is a piece on someone's board, Harry. The trick is knowing whose board you're on and whether you can change the game. I'm not playing their game, I have my own. The table doesn't care about your game, they care about their game, and in their game you're an anomaly, a variable they can't predict or control. Anomalies make the table nervous, and when the table gets nervous, they tend to neutralize the anomaly, John said. Or recruit it, depending on the mood of the room. Harry looked at his father. John's face was stone, but Harry could read the currents beneath, the cold calculation of a man assessing a threat to his family, the particular stillness that preceded action. What's their timeline? Harry asked. Unknown. The table moves slowly on strategic matters, months, sometimes years, but the conversation has begun. I've heard from 2 members directly and a third through intermediaries. They're interested. They want to know what you are and what you're willing to do. Tell them I'm not available. I've communicated as much, but the table doesn't accept no gracefully. They'll push. Eventually they'll push hard. Then we push back. Winston smiled. It was thin and sharp and carried the particular amusement of a man who had been managing impossible situations for decades and still found pleasure in the challenge. I was hoping you'd say that. I have some ideas about how to manage the table's interest. Nothing dramatic, strategic positioning, making it clear that interfering with Harry comes with a cost that outweighs the benefit. John, your reputation is the primary deterrent, but it's not infinite. We'll need additional leverage. The magical world, Harry said. Winston and John both looked at him. The table is nervous because I'm a bridge between 2 worlds, but a bridge goes both ways. Table sees me as a threat. They should also see me as an asset, someone who can give them access to the magical world's resources. Goblin gold, magical materials, information, not directly, not freely, but the possibility of access. If I'm more valuable as an ally than as a target, the calculus changes. Winston's smile widened. Jonathan, your son thinks like a statesman. He thinks like me. Number, he thinks better than you. You think in combat. He thinks in systems. Winston raised his glass to systems. Nobody toasted, but the point was made. They talked for another hour, strategy, contingencies, the specific mechanics of managing 2 shadowy power structures that were now aware of each other because of a boy who'd been pulled from a dumpster 11 years ago. By the time they finished, the lounge was filling with the evening crowd, assassins and criminals and fixers and ghosts, the Continental's usual clientele, dressed well and speaking quietly and radiating the particular calm of people who were very good at very dangerous things. Harry excused himself. John stayed to discuss operational details with Winston, specifics that were above Harry's clearance, not because John didn't trust him, but because compartmentalization was a habit, and habits kept you alive. He took the elevator to the top floor, then the stairs to the roof. The Continental's roof was flat and wide, bordered by a low parapet, and it offered a view of Manhattan that would have made a real estate developer weep. The city spread out below in every direction. Towers and streets and lights, millions of people living millions of lives, none of them knowing about the world that existed beneath their world, and none of them knowing about the world that existed behind their world. Harry stood at the parapet and looked out at New York. The night was warm, early summer, the city's best season, when the air smelled like hot pavement and possibility. He could feel the magic in the city, faint but present, traces of it in the old buildings, the underground rivers, the places where the human world got thin and something older showed through. He held out his hand. Magic flickered at his fingertips, not fire, not light, but something between the two. Raw power, barely constrained, the force that Marlowe had spent years teaching him to control, and that still, sometimes, came out wild and bright and untamed. He let it dance for a moment. Then he closed his fist, and it was gone. Voldemort was out there. A shade, a whisper, a broken thing clinging to existence through stolen life and split soul. He was hiding somewhere in the world, weakened but not dead because the Horcruxes anchored him, and until every fragment was destroyed, Tom Riddle would endure. The Horcrux in Harry's scar would be gone by next week. One fragment destroyed, but there were others. Marlowe's research suggested at least 5, possibly 6, hidden objects scattered across Britain, protected by curses and traps and the particular paranoia of a man who feared death above all things. Finding them would take years. Destroying them would take skill and power and resources that Harry didn't yet fully possess. And at the end of it, when the last fragment was gone and Voldemort was finally, truly mortal, there would be a confrontation. The prophecy demanded it. Neither can live while the other survives. Harry wasn't afraid of that confrontation. He'd been training for it since John picked him up in a rainy alley. Every punch, every spell, every morning run and evening drill and blade thrown at a target in a dark room, all of it pointed here to this, to the inevitable moment when Harry Wick would stand across from Tom Riddle and one of them would walk away. Harry intended to be the one walking. But that was the future. Tonight the city was bright and the air was warm and he was alive and he was home and his father was downstairs and his friends were safe and the piece of Voldemort's soul in his scar had an expiration date. Tonight was enough. He heard the roof door open behind him. Footsteps quiet, steady, the particular gait that was as familiar to Harry as his own heartbeat. John came to the parapet and stood beside his son. He had a fresh bourbon. He looked out at the city the same way Harry did, seeing it, assessing it, appreciating it without being overwhelmed by it. They stood in silence for a while. Father and son, assassin and wizard, the two most dangerous people in a building full of dangerous people, looking at the lights of New York and not needing to say a word. The director sent a message. John said, "Let me guess, she wants me for the summer. 2 weeks, blade work and advanced movement. She's offering it as a gift, which means she wants something. She always wants something. I told her number not this summer. The Gringotts procedure comes first. After you've recovered, we'll talk. And if she pushes, she won't. She knows about Hogwarts. She knows about Quirrell. She's recalculating. Everyone's recalculating. That's what happens when you change the board." Harry smiled. He leaned on the parapet and let the warm night air wash over him and felt, for the first time in months, something that might have been peace. Not the absence of danger. Peace never meant that, not in his world, but the absence of immediacy. A moment to breathe between operations. A pause. "Dad, yeah, Dumbledore said something to me in the hospital wing. He said he was glad you found me." John was quiet for a moment. "What do you think he meant?" "I think he meant it. I think he looked at me and saw something he didn't build, something he couldn't control, something that was better than what he'd planned, and I think it scared him, and I think it relieved him, and I think for just a second he was genuinely glad that someone else had done the job he was supposed to do." "Do you trust him?" "Number, but I think he's honest about one thing. He wants Voldemort destroyed, and on that at least we agree. He can be useful, as long as we remember what he is." "And what is he?" "A chess player, a good one, maybe the best in the magical world. But he's been playing alone for so long that he's forgotten what it's like when someone else is at the board." John took a drink. "He's not ready for you." "No one is." It wasn't arrogance, it was assessment. Harry had been evaluated by the Sorting Hat, by Dumbledore, by Snape, by goblins, by a Cerberus, by a Dark Lord, and none of them had known what to do with him because none of them had a category for what he was. He wasn't a savior, he wasn't a weapon, he wasn't a student or a soldier or a symbol. He was Harry Wick, the boy from the dumpster, the Continental's wizard, something new. "Next year's going to be harder," Harry said. "Voldemort failed, which means he'll try something different. And the political situation, the ministry, the high table, Dumbledore's games, it's all going to accelerate. Everyone knows about me now. Everyone's going to want a piece. Let them want. I intend to, but I need to be ready, really ready. Not just combat and magic. I need to understand the political structures, the alliances, the pressure points. Marlowe can help with the magical side. Winston can help with the table, but I need more. I need people inside both worlds who can feed me intelligence, who can watch the angles I can't see. You're building a network. I'm building a family, a bigger one. People I trust, who trust me, who understand what's coming and are willing to stand when it arrives." John looked at his son. The bourbon was gone, the glass empty in his hand, and the night was deep and warm and the city was a field of lights below them. "You know," John said, "when I found you in that alley, 15 months old, blue and cold and barely alive, I picked you up because I don't know why. I didn't think about it. I just did it. Instinct, maybe, or maybe something else. Something I didn't have a name for." He paused. "I wasn't a good man, Harry, before you. I was effective. I was disciplined. I was the best at what I did, but I wasn't good. You made me good. Or closer to it than I'd ever been." Harry looked at his father. John Wick, the Baba Yaga, the boogeyman's boogeyman, the man who killed 3 men in a bar with a pencil, standing on a rooftop in the summer dark, telling his son that love had made him something more than what he was. "You were always good, Dad. You just needed a reason." John put his hand on the back of Harry's neck, squeezed, the gesture, their gesture. 11 years of it, from a rainy alley to a rooftop, the physical language of a family that was small and strange and forged in violence and held together by something stronger than blood. "Come on," John said. "You need sleep, big week ahead. The goblins, the goblin." Then the director, "I'll let her have 2 weeks after you've recovered, then back to school in September." Another year of Snape. "You survived Voldemort. You can survive a man with greasy hair and a grudge." Debatable. They went inside, down the stairs, through the top floor, into the elevator. The Continental was alive around them, music from the lounge, footsteps in corridors, the quiet hum of a world that never slept. Harry's room was on the 7th floor next to John's. Clean sheets, soft light, the particular safety of a place where the rules meant something, and the walls kept the chaos out. Harry stood at his window and looked out one last time. The city glittered. Somewhere out there Voldemort was running. Somewhere the High Table was deliberating. Somewhere Dumbledore was planning. Somewhere Death Eaters were plotting and ministry officials were scheming, and the vast machinery of two hidden worlds was grinding forward, and Harry Wick was at the center of all of it, a fulcrum, a catalyst, a boy who shouldn't have survived infancy and had instead become the most dangerous 11-year-old on the planet. He thought about the dumpster, the rain, the cold. The small, thin crying that had brought John Wick out of a service corridor and into an alley and changed the course of two worlds. He thought about his mother dying in a doorway, her love becoming a weapon. He thought about his father reaching into the garbage, lifting him out, carrying him into the light. He thought about Voldemort running, always running from the one thing he feared most, and Harry smiled because Tom Riddle had spent decades running from death and had never understood that death wasn't the thing he should have been afraid of. Harry was the thing he should have been afraid of, and Harry was just getting started. He closed the curtains, lay down, felt the familiar weight of the wand under his pillow and the goblin-forged knife on the nightstand and the magic humming softly in his blood, a song that never stopped, that had been playing since the night a killing curse rebounded and a scar was made and a boy was marked as something extraordinary. Sleep came easy. The deep, restful sleep of someone who was exactly where they were supposed to be, doing exactly what they were meant to do, surrounded by people who would burn the world down for them. Tomorrow the work would start again, the goblins, the Horcruxes, the long, patient, relentless campaign to dismantle Tom Riddle piece by piece and end the war that had started before Harry was born. But tonight he slept, and in his sleep he dreamed of a rainy night and a pair of strong hands and a voice, his father's voice, low and steady and certain, saying the words that had built him, shaped him, made him what he was. Remember who you are, a Wick. And across the city, in a lounge that smelled like bourbon and old leather, Winston set down his glass and looked at Karen and said, with the particular gravity of a man who had just glimpsed the future, "That boy is going to change everything." Karen, who had read Where the Wild Things Are to a toddler behind a hotel desk and watched that toddler grow into something unprecedented, allowed himself a rare smile. "He already has, sir." Winston raised his glass to the empty room, and somewhere in the dark spaces of the world, in the cracks between life and death, a shade with red eyes felt a tremor, the distant, seismic vibration of something it had never encountered before. Something that was not afraid, something that was coming. Yeah, the world seemed to whisper, "I'm thinking he's back." But this time it wasn't about John Wick, it was about his son.